Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku's Death Awakened His Quirk? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Having a dormant quirk factor was just as good as not having a quirk at all, Midoriya Izuku was quick to learn. Even though the specialist reassured a 5-year-old him and his mother that he did indeed have a quirk and that it was only a matter of when it would activate, 10 years passed and nothing happened. Izuku was never able to pull objects towards him, breath fire, or do anything at all that would be perceived as extraordinary. Any hope or excitement for Izuku's quirk had long since dissipated, quickly replaced with derision, scorn, and contempt. His peers sneered at him for daring to keep hoping that he would get a quirk. They beat him up for attempting to protect children who were just like him, quirkless and unable to defend themselves. Even his childhood friend, the boy whom Izuku had known since they were in diapers, jumped into the bandwagon of torment after a perceived slight against his ego, when all Izuku wanted to do was help him out of a stream after falling from a bridge. 10 years of horrific abuse, pain, and despair followed. Line after line was crossed, with peers seeing no harm in using their quirks on Izuku simply for existing in the same plane as they did. No adult came to the green-haired boy's aid either. They dismissed and derided him, believing that he was not worth the air they all breathed, let alone someone that deserved help. The ultimate low would finally come one innocuous day in Izuku's final year of junior high, when his former childhood friend-turned-tormentor destroyed one of his notebooks and told him to kill himself. Just throw yourself off a roof, useless Deku. Bakugo Katsuki sneered, no one will care that you are dead. Maybe then, you'll get a quirk, in your next FING life, that is. Izuku was left all alone, Katsuki's cruel laughter fading as he left with his lackeys. To add insult to injury, the parade of misery was far from over. When Izuku finally managed to pull himself together and trudge home, he was attacked by a villain made up of foul-smelling slime in an underpass that hardly anyone used. It was the perfect setting for a cold murder case. The underpass had no security cameras. No one would witness Izuku's life come to a painful end, until All Might of all people showed up and eviscerated the villain with one overpowered punch. And that might have been the end of the story, but Izuku, desperate for answers from his lifetime idol, grabbed the hero's leg just as he took off into air. After some airborne struggle, All Might lands on the roof of a random office building to get the teen off safely. Again, that might have been the end of the story, except that the #1 hero harbored an enormous secret, one that was involuntarily exposed to an unexpected Izuku. One promised to not tell anyone about what he had seen, the true emaciated form of Toshinori Yagi made to leave, when Izuku, out of desperation, asked the single question that would have major repercussions for not just him and the symbol of peace, but for the very future of the entire country. All Might, please, I need to know. Can someone with a dormant quirk factor ever become a hero like you? The emaciated man turned to him. A dormant quirk factor? The specialist told me that I have a quirk, but it's dormant. I can't do anything, but surely, there must be a way for me to become a hero, right? A beat of silence. My boy, be patient. I'm sure your quirk will manifest eventually. In the meantime, please do not do anything stupid. Don't put yourself in any unnecessary danger. You'll just cause more trouble for the pros and everyone else around you. As you said, you can't do anything, because you don't have an active quirk to protect yourself. Stay safe, okay? I'll let the security of this building know you're up here. With that, Toshinori brushed past Izuku and headed for the rooftop door, leaving a frozen teen behind. It would be 5 minutes after that door clicked shut behind the man before Izuku was able to move again. His legs gave out and he crumpled to the floor. Izuku tried and failed to not hyperventilate. It was not an blatant rejection, but it was effectively the same thing. All Might saw him as useless, as someone who would only get in the way because he didn't have an active quirk. The man didn't believe he could become a hero even without a quirk. Give up already, Deku. How can you be a hero without a quirk? No. There must be another way. Look at him. Stupid Deku thinks he can be a hero with those creepy notes. No. Mum, it's been so long, and I still don't have a quirk. Do you think I can still be a hero? I'm not sure, Izuku. But I'm sure it'll come soon. Let's keep up hope. How can I, Mum? Even All Might doesn't believe in me. Just effing throw yourself off a roof, useless Deku. No one will any care that you are dead. Maybe then, you'll get a quirk, in your next FING life, that is. Izuku slowly picked himself up. He wasn't hyperventilating anymore. His expression was blank, and his emerald green irises dulled. He sauntered over towards the railing. Looking down, he could see that it was quite a long drop to the road below. A fall from such a height would inflict serious injury at the very least. Izuku pulled his shoes off his feet, and placed them to one side. He stepped onto the ledge, and hoisted himself over the railing. Perched the precipice of no return, he took his final breath, and pushed himself off. For a moment, the tiniest of split seconds, he was airborne, just like a bird taking off from a branch. But unlike a bird, Izuku didn't have wings to keep him in the air. The descent was swift. The ground approached rapidly, and Izuku closed his eyes. His body hit the pavement, and a great burst of light lit up the surrounding area. By the time anyone noticed the teenage boy throwing himself off the roof, it was far too late to do anything useful. Some even took out their phones to record the impending death. But the moment he hit the ground, a blinding burst of light exploded. Screams erupted, thinking that it was a villain attack. People fell to the ground, curling in on themselves in an attempt to protect themselves from the perceived coming attacks, while others fled. The sudden appearance of fire bursting from the concrete and tarmac in great columns did nothing to quell the quickly escalating panic. Smoke began to fill the air, as the ground shook with strong tremors. Amidst the chaos, at first no one noticed something emerge from the exact same spot where the boy had hit the pavement. Because of all the smoke, soot and flames, it wasn't immediately clear what it actually was. A few sharp-eyed individuals will tell the police later that it appeared humanoid, rising up from the ground like a demon from the deepest depths of hell. When the wind began to blow and pushed some of the smoke away, more laid their first sights upon this creature. It had the head of an raptor, almost like an eagle, with impressive crest feathers that flowed down a distinctively human-like torso, matching the tail feathers that rolled like lava spilling down the side of a volcano. It had hands that ended with clawed tips, and avian-like feet with sharp talons. The ripped remains of a Gakuran uniform hung loosely over the torso and legs. Its entire form seemed to be made up of fire, little wisps breaking away and disappearing the air with each movement. The people who remained were frozen, unable to move as the creature reached its full height. Shivers ran down their spines as it appeared to open its eyes. There were no pupils, just glowing stylized diamonds of light. Then the creature shrieked. People cowered, covering their ears as they feared the worst. It sounded like a mix of a human scream and a raptor's roar. The columns of fire surged towards the creature, swirling around it in a ferocious dance. Expansive feathered wings sprouted from its back, a appealing mix of orange, red, and yellow, the tips burning with lisps of fire. Before anyone could react, the avian shot up into the air in a great blast of a fire. It shot off into the distance like a comet, disappearing from the sight. The fires left on the road extinguished themselves, leaving behind spots of blackened, melting tarmac. It would be several seconds before more quick-thinking individuals pulled out their phones to contact law enforcement personnel about a potential villain running loose. The avian creature had been flying for 15 minutes when it sees a great plume of smoke in the distance. Explosions went off, and fires appeared to be spreading quickly. A villain attack? Curiosity piqued, the avian took off in that direction. It arrived to a scene of absolute carnage. The road was filled with pieces of debris and shattered glass. Cars were overturned, and lampposts had been knocked down. Police officers were holding back a crowd of curious onlookers, as a trio of pro-heroes that it vaguely recognized as Kamui Woods, Death Arms, and Me Lady, faced off against a villain that was. The avian's eyes widened. It was the same slime villain that All Might had eviscerated in the underpass. And trapped in its slimy folds, was a blond, spiky-haired boy with red eyes that the avian was all too familiar with. Katsuki clawed at the slime, trying to free himself. But his hands were trapped, and his explosions were nullified by the material. Despite his struggles, more slime simply smothered his nose and mouth, cutting off any oxygen from reaching his burning lungs. It was evidently clear that Katsuki was losing the fight, but even then, the three heroes standing only several meters in front did nothing. Despite being in the air, the avian could hear them whisper frantically amongst themselves about how they didn't have the right quirks to safely extract Katsuki from the villain. It was ridiculous, completely absurd, and it was going to cost Katsuki his life if they continued to do nothing. The avian saw no choice but to intervene. Those on the ground would never forget the sight of a bipedal avian-like creature dive-bombing the villain, roaring loudly. A blistering burst of fire was blasted at it, hot enough to burn away a section of its body. The villain screamed in agony, the distraction allowing the avian to grab Katsuki and yank him out of the slimy folds. It tossed the blonde towards the three heroes and landed on the tarmac, ready to face off against its opponent. Raising its hands, fireballs of varying sizes materialized. The slime villain, still reeling from having part of its body seared off, had no time to recover as the flaming orbs were hurled one after another towards it. The monster's unholy screams rattled the eardrums of the watching crowd, as it was severely burned and scorched. Finally, the avian surged forward and slammed a hand into slime. Fire burst to life, and quickly consumed the rest of the villain. It would be 5 seconds of agony before the monster was no more, reduced to nothing but some ash and broken tooth fragments. The avian backed up, when Death Arms shouted, "Stop right there!" A wall of fire burst from the ground, preventing the massive armed hero from getting any closer. The avian took off into the air, leaving behind a stunned Katsuki and one Toshinori Yagi, who had been watching the attack whilst hiding in an alleyway, unable to do anything with his time limit used up. Midoriya Inko was worried. It was nearing 7 in the evening, and her beloved son had still not returned from school. She had called him multiple times, but all she got was his voicemail recording requesting her to leave a message. As the minutes passed, Inko became increasingly frantic, especially when she turned on the television and the local news broadcast was reporting on a villain attack downtown, where she recognized Katsuki being held hostage by the slime villain. She tried calling Izuku again, but once more, it was straight to voicemail. As 7:30 approached, and still no Izuku, Inko stopped pacing around the living room and beelined for the phone again, with the intent of calling the police to file a missing persons report. But just as she picked up the receiver, the doorbell rang. Immediately, hope blossomed in her chest. Inko dropped the receiver and hurried for the door. She opened it, expecting her son to be outside. Instead, she came face to chest with the same avian creature that saved Katsuki from the slime villain. A beat of silence. Inko screamed. The creature immediately reacted, "Mom. Wait. It's me, Izuku." Inko's scream died instantly. Her mind began to spin. The voice was not like her son's. It was too deep, too unhuman-like, something one might expect some deity or otherworldly being to have, not a 15-year-old teenager who on his best days was the literal embodiment of positivity and sunshine. But at the same time, she would have to be deaf and dumb to not hear the desperation in the creature's voice. And call it the mother's intuition, but there was something about the creature's voice that sounded somewhat familiar. It was as if a faint shade of her Izuku was inside this creature. She couldn't quite describe it, but it was a compelling feeling in her heart. How do I know you're Izuku and not some villain? The avian's eyes immediately wilted, enough to almost make her feel guilty. However, before either one could utter another word, the sound of sirens approaching cut through the air. Peering over the common corridor railing, Inko and the avian saw police cruisers pulling up at the car park below. Officers began swarming out, several cordoning off the exit towards the main road and others beelining for the elevators. "Mom, go back inside. I'll deal with them." Despite that, Inko remained too much in shock to move. Within seconds, police personnel were already swarming out of the elevators straight towards them. "Freeze. Put your hands up." The avian immediately complied, giving the officers the chance to force it to the floor and restrain it. That snapped Inko out of her shock. "No. Please. Don't hurt it. It didn't do anything to me." Please stand back," an officer said methodically. "This is a potential villain here. We are not taking any risks that it might lash out at us." "No. You don't understand." Inko cried, "That might be my son." The personnel in the corridor all turned towards her. One officer spoke for them all. "Pardon? My son? He had a dormant quirk factor," Inko explained quickly. It might have triggered today. I don't have definitive proof, but I'm at least partially certain that it is my son." The avian's eyes almost melted in gratitude. A moment of uncomfortable silence followed. "This might require Tsukachi-san's assistance," one officer remarked. Another sighed, "Whatever, let's just get this over with." He turned to Inko. "If you would be so kind as to follow us down to the station, we can sort this out." Inko didn't need to be asked twice. Tsukachi Naomasa was a very perceptive individual. Not just because he was arguably the best detective in the entire Mizutofu police force, but it was just his nature. When presented with a scenario or situation, Tsukachi would immediately ponder how he might end up getting involved, especially if it involved debuting criminals or villains. So when he watched the news broadcast reporting about a humanoid avian creature appearing out of the sky, plucking a middle school student out of a villain made of slime and subsequently cremating said villain to nothing but ashes, at the same time the station started receiving multiple calls about some villain rising out of the ground from the depths of hell, Tsukachi instinctively knew that he was going to get dragged into this debacle, probably sooner than later. Best to stock up on the coffee while he had the chance. Sure enough, just as the detective finished brewing his latest kettle of coffee, Officer Sansa, a man with the head of a cat, knocked and entered his office. "Tsukachi-san, you're needed over at interrogation room 3. "It's the flaming chicken, isn't it?" the detective asked, half in jest. Sansa nodded. "Best get to it then." Inko wrung her hands nervously. She was now in an observation room with an officer, next to the interrogation room where the avian creature whom she increasingly believed was actually her son was being held. She could see the avian, but not vice versa due to the one-way window. Inko could easily see the slight nervousness in the avian's eyes, and she desperately wanted to be by its side, despite not being completely certain that it was actually Izuku. The speaker system in the observation room crackled to life, as a man that the officer told her was Detective Tsukachi entered the interrogation room. The avian looked up, the handcuffs securing him to the bench rattling slightly. "Good evening," Tsukachi said as he sat down opposite the avian and began the recording. "I am Detective Tsukachi Naomasa, and my quirk is lie detector, which means I can tell if you are telling the truth or not. I hope that I can have your fullest cooperation here." The avian wordlessly nodded. Tsukachi started. "First, what is your name?" "Midoriya Izuku." Inko immediately turned to the officer next to her. "Can you ask if it is telling the truth?" She nodded, and went over to a telephone next to the window. The officer picked up the receiver, and the phone in the interrogation room rang. Tsukachi picked it up. "Yes?" "Officer Yukimoto, detective. Midoriya-san is requesting to know if what the avian said was true or if it was lying." "My quirk registered it as truth," Tsukachi replied. Inko gasped, and was immediately by Yukimoto's side, grabbing onto her arm desperately. "It's my son. Please let me be with him. Please." The officer turned her attention back to the call. "Permission to let Midoriya-san into the interrogation room?" Now, unlike the stereotype that detectives were heartless truth-seekers with no capacity for empathy, Tsukachi was not a monster. "Permission granted. Please SERT Midoriya-san over." It also spoke about the detective's capability of empathy when Inko was led into the room, and immediately flew over to the avian Izuku's side, that he felt his heart warm up. If his younger sister was in Izuku's position, he'd do anything and everything to be by her side until the whole mess was sorted out. Inko was sobbing into Izuku's chest. The avian would have hugged his mother, but one of his hand was still cuffed to the bench, so he used one of his wings instead. "You're free to go, Officer Yukimoto," Tsukachi said, dismissing the policewoman. Once she had left, he returned to the Midoriyas. "If you're able, Midoriya-kun, I would like to continue with the questioning." Izuku nodded. How old are you? 15. What's your quirk? Izuku glanced down at his avian body. I guess this is my quirk. Tsukachi nodded, writing in his notepad, how did your quirk manifest? According to what I've heard, you were first spotted in this form only today. Inko had just regained control of her emotions, completely unaware that she was about to fall apart again. I threw myself off the roof of a building. Silence. Tsukachi almost snapped the pen he'd been holding, and Inko's eyes had widened to the size of dinner plates. Izuku. The detective tried his best to pull himself back together. Midoriya-kun, please elaborate. Izuku regarded the man with serious eyes. Detective, can I have your reassurance that you won't judge me? Tsukachi nodded, prompting the avian to continue. I met All Might earlier today. Due to some recklessness on my part, we ended up on the roof of a building. I asked him whether I could become a hero like him, even with a dormant quirk factor. Told me to patient, that my quirk will come eventually. In the meantime, he told me to stay out of the way of the pros, that I will be simply a liability to them and innocent civilians. I can't do anything, because I didn't have an active quirk, he said. He left me on the roof, and I decided that I couldn't bear the pain anymore. I threw myself off the roof, and when I hit the ground I just saw fire. Lots of fire. I heard screaming. Something was changing inside me, and the next thing I knew, I was standing again, surrounded by columns of fire. The detective was silent once more, seemingly unaware that he had snapped his pen into two, the ink staining his palm and the notepad. Inko had burst into tears again, clinging onto her son as she descended into hysteria. Izuku remained neutral, as much as his eyes seemed to show. It would be a full 10 minutes before Tsukachi could push the thoughts of throttling his friend out of his head and continue the questioning. You mentioned that your quirk factor had been dormant until now. Has it always been this bad? Izuku regarded the detective seriously. I presume you are not blind to the difficult lives endured by quirkless individuals, right? Tsukachi nodded, indicating that he was very well aware. For 10 years I grew up effectively quirkless. I was bullied horribly. Peers used their quirks on me, seeing me as an easy punching bag because I didn't have an active quirk to fight back. The teachers never stepped in once. They turned a blind eye to my torment. And then, this afternoon, someone told me to kill myself in the hopes that I will actually get a quirk in the next life. Tsukachi's hands were trembling, and Inko appeared to be exhausting herself out of the hysteria and the shock of the latest bombshell. There was just 2 more questions that needed to be asked. Who told you that? And which school do you go to? Aldera Middle School, and the person who suicide baited me was Bakugo Katsuki. The shock was too much. Inko slumped down and passed out. Katsuki? What the F do you want, old hag? Watch your tongue, brat. Get changed and get your lazy butt down here. We're going to the police station. That confused Katsuki. Whatever the F for? Hell do I know. Just get your butt down here. We're leaving. Despite not being satisfied by his mother's response, the explosive teen went to get. It was nearing 9 at night, and he was planning to go to bed. Why the ever-loving F would he need to go down to the police station? Never once did the possibility of his past coming up to bite him in the butt ever cross his mind as he trudged down the stairs, where his parents were waiting for him. Took you long enough, you little sheet, his mother said, let's go. Katsuki ignored that and his father's measly attempt at trying to get his wife to tone down her rough language. They got into the car and drove downtown towards the station. His parents spoke to the receptionist upon arrival, Katsuki lingering behind and tapping his foot impatiently. A police officer was called down and led them to the exact same interrogation room where Izuku had been in earlier. Unbeknownst to the Bakugas, said teen and his mother were watching behind the one-way window in the adjacent observation room. 5 minutes later, Tsukachi entered the interrogation room, expression deceptively blank. Thank you for coming down at this inconvenient hour, the detective addressed the 2 adults. There is something of the utmost importance that you need to know. Is it about Katsuki? Masaru, the explosive teen's father, asked. Unfortunately, yes. Tsukachi replied, expression darkening as the temperature of the room metaphorically plummeted. Bakugo-san, your son here is facing charges of instigating suicide and having an involvement in the actual suicide attempt, among others. The bombshell was dropped. Mitsuki, the mother, sputtered. Tsukachi took quiet vindication at their horror, opening a manila folder. I have been privy to rather damning testimony that not only has Bakugo-kun here suicide-baited appear simply for lacking a quirk, but his other actions against the victim include destruction of personal property, illegal quirk usage with the intent to cause bodily harm, verbal abuse with the intent to cause mental distress, cruel acts of pranking with the intent to cause long-term mental distress and instigating others to bully said peer. His suicide baiting also resulted in a completed suicide attempt. He regarded the Bakugas sternly, and for the record, I have a quirk that determines if a person is telling the truth or is lying. And everything I just listed was true. Spluttering, Mitsuki rounded on her son. Only one individual fitted the description of the victim, Wyu in brat. How could you do such things to Izuku? He was effing quirkless. Katsuki shouted back, trying and failing to defend himself. He is worthless. Nothing but dash. Shut your effing mouth. Mitsuki screamed, slapping her son across the face harshly. I don't know where you got into your effing head that quirkless means inferior, but we never taught you such nonsense. I did not raise you to become a effing monster. Normally, Masaru would try to intervene whenever his wife got physical with their son, but he was too much in shock to do anything. Tsukachi watched mother and son scream at one another and trade blows with each other for about a minute, before deciding that it was enough. He closed his manila folder, raised it up and slammed it on the table, startling the fighting pair out of their screaming match. Wonderful, we can continue, the detective said, reopening his file. Now, with these charges, Bakugo-kun is looking at a very long spell in juvenile hall, since he is still below the age of majority that would see him formally charged in the court of law and sentenced to prison instead. That would mean absolutely zero chance of attending a heroic school and getting a professional license and permanent black marks on his record. Katsuki flinched, his palms beginning to sweat. But Tsukachi was not done. However, I have been told that such course of action will not be beneficial in the long run, and I have been presented with some alternatives that will be shared with you all right now. He picked up the receiver connected to the observation room next door. Midoriya-san, you and your son can come in now. Confusion spread between the family of three, which quickly morphed into shock when the door opened. Inko stepped in with an unreadable expression, flanked by the same avian creature that saved Katsuki from the slime villain earlier that day. Deku? Izuku smirked. Good to see you too, Kaken. He spat that nickname out. Looks like your little advice turned out right in the end, because look at me. He spread his hands out. My suicide attempt actually activated my quirk. I am now an anthropomorphic phoenix with pyrokinetic abilities. At least, that was what the specialist deemed me as. I was even able to save your ungrateful but from that slime villain earlier today. Katsuki lost the ability to speak, as did his parents. I will never forgive you for what you have done to me for the past 10 years, Bakugo Katsuki. Izuku made it extremely clear, it is so easy for me to simply wash my hands of you by agreeing to have you shipped off to juvenile hall. You will never get to be a hero, while I get to become what has sustained my life right up until my suicide attempt. However, I will not stoop down to your level. Despite everything you and Aldera has done to me, I will be merciful. Masaru spoke quietly. What do you mean? Sending your son off to juvenile hall is too easy and convenient, Izuku replied, tone becoming a little kinder for the man who tried his best, but was ultimately powerless to stop the monster Katsuki has become. He'll just be surrounded by people like him. He will fester, never learning from his mistakes. His denial of any wrongdoing will be reinforced by those around him, and it will simply spiral from there. Katsuki has already acted like a villain to me. What's stopping him from becoming an actual villain to others upon release? You little fucker dash. Katsuki, stand down. Masaru shouted, startling his son. The patriarch had never raised his voice before, ever. You are already in deep trouble as it is. Don't make things any worse for yourself. So stunned he was, Katsuki sat back down. As I was saying, Izuku continued, unfazed, Simply putting him away into the system will only turn him into the physical embodiment of how he has been acting for so long thus far. I will be fair, a good portion of the blame lies with Aldera and this society, and we don't need another villain tainting the lives of the innocent. So Detective Tsukachi and I came to a compromise. Katsuki will not be sent to juvenile hall and placed on probation for 10 months. If he succeeds in clearing that with no infraction, he will still be able to attend UE, but he will be barred from the heroics course for a PRD of time as determined by the principal of UE, Nizu. If he proves himself worthy, Katsuki will then be allowed to join the heroics course on Principal Nizu's discretion. I have already contacted him on what had happened, and he agreed to the terms. So, he regarded Hibakugus. What is your decision? Masaru immediately spoke up, regardless of his wife and son's input, we accept unconditionally. Too long he'd been a doormat, it was time to put his foot down. Also, Izuen, I know that things have been traumatic for you for too long a PRD of time. If you require therapy, I will be more than happy to fund any help you need. Izuku's eyes warmed. Uncle Masu, it's fine. There's no need to trouble yourself with me. You could say that following my death and rebirth, I no longer hold any lasting animosity towards your son. After all, Katsuki is effectively dead to me. Not only do I not want anything to do with him anymore, I am also filing a restraint order against him. If that works out, he will not be able to come within a 50-meter radius of me without my express permission or if circumstances prevent it. To do so will be seen as a breaking of his probational terms. Masaru nodded. I understand. And I know it means little from me, but I sincerely apologize for letting Katsuki become who he is now. To further prove his point, the man got up from the bench and bowed deeply to the humanoid phoenix. Thank you, Uncle Masaru, but please don't bow to me. Izuku stepped forward to embrace the man. What's done is done. I'm ready to move on, and so should your family too. Masaru allowed a small smile and nodded. Tsukachi decided it was time to wrap things up. It was getting late after all. Well, seeing that things have been cleared, I believe we can bring this meeting to a close. Bakuga-san, a probational officer will visit you in the coming week to formalize the terms of your son's probation. There is an officer waiting outside who will see your family out. I understand, Masaru nodded, before turning to his wife and son, we're leaving, let's go. Overwhelmed by the whole proceedings, Mitsuki and Katsuki did not utter a word of argument. As they got up and headed for the door, Inko spoke up, Mitsuki. All attention turned towards the petite green-haired woman. From now on, you are dead to me. Don't come looking for me or my son ever again. It was another blow to Mitsuki's battered heart. She departed with her head down, dragging Katsuki behind her. Masaru bowed to Tsukachi and the Midoriyas once more, before closing the door behind him. Izuku let out an enormous sigh. That felt so liberating. I can't imagine how much so, Izuku. Tsukachi grinned, albeit a little tiredly. I'm really happy for you. I just wish you didn't have to go through 10 years of hell before you could find such liberation. Well, what's done is done, Izuku shrugged. Thank you though for your immense help. And also for not having me arrested for illegal quirk use and vigilantism. It's the least I can do, Izuku. After all, you did do the jobs of 3 fumbling heroes who are now weathering a PR nightmare. Just make sure to stay out of trouble, okay? You don't want anything to jeopardize your chances of getting into UE, after all. I'll make sure to remember that. Izuku saluted with a wing. Thank you once again, Tsukachi-san. It's my pleasure, the detective's grin grew. Have a good night, both of you. The Midoriyas made their farewells, and left the interrogation room. Once the door closed behind them, Tsukachi sighed. His night was far from over, unfortunately. He picked up the receiver. Officer Sansa, bring Tashinori Yagi in, please. The days after the debacle at the interrogation room were extremely awkward for the students of Aldera. At first, it was so blindingly obvious that Izuku's classmates and peers, the very same people who used to scorn him, pick on and beat him up, were trying to worm their way back into his good graces. They weren't even being subtle about it. Izuku-kun, one of his classmates said as if they were on close, personal terms from the very beginning, how about we hang out today after school? We've always been pals, right? Izuku, Can you help me with my homework? Izuku, my man, could you cover for me while I skip Minamoto-sensei's class? The brown-nosing only got worse as 3 days passed, eating away at Izuku's temper. It finally came to a head when someone from 3B had the audacity to solicit him for SXL favors in front of a crowd of students. That was the exact moment when Izuku's fuse burned off completely. The offending student would stumble back, hair smoldering. As Izuku put out the fire, he conjured up his hand. He only spoke 2 words, F-. From that day onwards, no one bothered him anymore. Sure, the admiring looks had now become that of fear, but Izuku preferred it that way. That'll teach them for attempting to curry favor and being the textbook definition of hypocrites. And speaking of hypocrites, the tables were clearly turned on Katsuki. Back when his peers were still clamoring to be his friend despite prolonged PRDS of past torment, one of the common questions was how his quirk came about. Izuku would answer with brutal honesty, I attempted to die by suicide, jumping off the roof of a building to be more precise. My quirk manifested when I hit the pavement. Katsuki's lackeys, former lackeys connected the dots and spread the salacious gossip like hot potatoes. Within a day, the explosive blonde went from top dog to social pariah. Izuku watched on with silent neutrality as Katsuki became the victim of merciless bullying, cruel pranks, and humiliating verbal jabs, all of which he couldn't fight back for fear of breaking his probation terms. Someone even scrawled, "Take a swan dive from the roof, and pray that you'll be a decent person in your next life," on the blonde's desk with a permanent marker, and placed a vase of red spider lilies as a nice gesture, as if Katsuki was already dead. Izuku realized then that a line had been crossed, especially when none of the teachers did anything, just like when he was the target of the bullying. He told his mother what had been going on. While Inko had severed all ties with the explosive teen, she couldn't, in good conscience, allow such behavior to continue. She reported the incidents to Tsukachi, who after a short investigation, procured the warrant for Aldera Middle School to be shut down. The local newspapers had a field day when police cruisers swarmed into Aldera's front grounds with sirens blaring. Every single staff member, including the principal, were all led out in HNDCFFS. The students were interrogated, a good many subsequently arrested and taken into police custody. By day's end, the shutters were pulled down and the gates locked. The remaining students were told find alternative schooling options, as the scandal began running through the printing presses for the rest of the week. Now with all the free time in the world, Izuku shifted his focus on his biggest priority, the UE entrance exam. He had 10 months to prepare. Best make full use of his time. Gym memberships were useful, though Izuku quickly found another place to build up his strength and train his quirk at the same time. Dagoba Municipal Park and Beach. As Izuku was quick to discover, to call it a park or beach was an overstatement. With piles of rotting garbage, sewage and pollution spanning the entire length of the coastline, it was more of an illegal landfill than a place of fun and relaxation amidst nature. He covered his beak with a custom-made mask. Time to get to work. It was painstaking, but Izuku moved with vigor. He began with the smaller pieces of garbage, using his fire to cremate them into ashes. Now, before you ask about air pollution, Izuku discovered that while his fire did burn objects, no smoke or foul-smelling odors were produced. He attributed it to being a phoenix, whose fire is said, in folklore, to be a purifying construct. Speaking of which, when he was not clearing up the trash at Dagoba, Izuku sought out every bit of information available on phoenixes and their powers. He knew that pure phoenixes can never truly die, reborn from the ashes of their previous form. Izuku wasn't entirely sure if immortality applied to him too, since he couldn't really be called a pure phoenix, and he wasn't willing to test that theory out. There was pyrokinesis, which he was already familiar with, and flying at supersonic speeds, which is darn useful for all kinds of purposes. There was also regeneration from non-fatal injuries or wounds, both for himself and others. Again, something he didn't want to really test on himself, but was more than willing to do for others if he actually had such an ability. Oh well, he'll find out sooner or later. Back to cleaning Dagoba. As his strength grew, Izuku began hauling bigger pieces together into piles where he would set off a bonfire and mass cremate the trash. The months continued by, and more of Dagoba's original pristine beauty emerged. Finally, 8 months after he first started, it was done. Cremating the last piece of trash, a broken oven, and sweeping away the ashes, Izuku turned back to the final result. The sun was rising over the horizon, light reflecting off the undulating water and the sand grains of the cleared beach. For the first time in God knows how long, the smell of fresh, salty air permeated the coastline, a far cry from the rotting, putrid and decaying odors that soured the atmosphere of months prior. Izuku knelt down and traced a clawed hand over the sand. Even the little grains felt clean, when they used to be saturated with all kinds of horrendous fluids that he didn't want to know the source of. He even read a blog post speculating that Dagoba was used by criminals and villains to hide the corpses of their victims away from prying eyes. And while he never actually encountered any corpses in the 8 months of clearing, even Izuku had to admit that the concept wasn't that far-fetched. He just hoped that if he did cremate any bodies unwittingly, their souls were in a much better place now. A strong breeze blew across the coastline, ruffling his crest feathers and wings. The sun was almost completely over the horizon. Izuku decided it was time to go home. He hadn't had breakfast yet, and even though a major milestone had been completed, he still had 2 months before the entrance exam, and he wasn't going to slack off. Back to the gym for him then. This was it. The day that he had been working towards for the past 10 months. Izuku was stronger but not much taller, stupid genetics, and he was ready. His mother made him katsudon for breakfast in order to give him an energy boost, and he was eternally grateful for that. You got this, Izuku. Do your best and don't do anything reckless, okay? I promise, Ma. Thank you for supporting me all this while. I am your mother, I will always support you, no matter what you do. Izuku's eyes warmed, and he hugged Inko. He could do this. He was huge, for lack of a better word. It was also packed. Thousands of hopefuls, heroics and otherwise, were filing past the gates into the twin glassed buildings for the entrance exam of their registration. Izuku took a moment to simply bask in the atmosphere. It was tense, but at the same time, it was filled with determined hopefulness. He didn't want to be a cynical, but for a good many candidates, their very futures hung in the balance. Many have dreamed of attending UI and becoming a hero, but Izuku knew that not everyone will get that chance. Even him, after everything that had happened over the past 10 months, stood a still possible, no matter how small, chance that he wouldn't do well enough to secure a spot in the heroics course. Izuku sighed, that was the nerves talking. Either way, he was doing this. He took a few steps forward, and his shoe hit something. Izuku looked down. The pathway was made of bricks, and one of them was sticking up. If he still had eyebrows, Izuku would have raised one. This was unusual. Hey, is everything okay? Izuku turned back to the unfamiliar voice. A girl with short brown hair styled in a bob, dressed in a sailor fuku uniform, gave him a questioning look. Oh, I'm sorry. Was I blocking you? Blinking at the unexpectedly deep voice, the girl quickly pulled herself together. Yeah, actually. Is everything okay? Yeah, I just noticed one of the bricks sticking up from the ground. The girl glanced down. Huh, you're right. Why though? I don't know, but it is a safety hazard. Izuku tried stepping on the brick to push it down, but it didn't budge. He narrowed his eyes. He summoned some fire to his shoe and kicked the brick. The hardened clay immediately combusted, turning to ash in 2 seconds. There, that should solve it. The girl blinked. Not what I was expecting, but as good as anything, I suppose. Anyway, good luck for the exam. I'm sure you'll do great. What a nice girl, Izuku thought as she rejoined the crowd of hopefuls heading for the doors. I hope she gets in too. He headed for the doors, unaware of another brick rising up and filling the spot of the one that got cremated. Hey H-U-Y-Y. Present Mike slid onto the stage with as much subtlety as a screaming cockatiel. Welcome to the briefing for the UI practical assessment. Can I get a loud yeah? Izuku glanced around. It was dead silent in the auditorium, no one daring to open their mouths. He sighed. A bunch of wussies they were. He stood up. Who? Tough crowd, aren't you lot? Present Mike chuckled. And to candidate 167, thank you. You're a great cookie, and I appreciate you. Izuku sat back down, ignoring the looks he was getting from those sitting around him. With that out of the way, let's get this show rolling, the voice hero continued, as a screen rolled down behind him. Each and every one of you here today are all potential heroes in the making. And what do heroes do? They take down villains, of course. In this practical assessment, you will be up against 4 different kinds of robots. The screen lit up and revealed the silhouettes of the 4 mentioned robots. Each robot carries a different number of points, 1 through 3. Present Mike explained, it will be your job to destroy or disarm as many robots as possible within a certain time limit. Now, I won't disclose how long you all have. Certainly raises the stakes, doesn't it? Izuku didn't particularly mind that. What he did mind, however, was someone shooting up from their seat and blasting their voice across the auditorium. "Excuse me." Izuku turned around, as did virtually everyone else. A bespectacled teen with a navy blue undercut, dressed primly in a school uniform that screamed Rich Kid Academy, was chopping a hand at Present Mike. "You did not divulge about the 4th robot. Aren't the staff of UE supposed to be extremely thorough with their presentations? And you," he suddenly turned on Izuku, the one who looks like a flaming bird. "Do you think this is nothing but a joke? This is an extremely important occasion, and yet there you are, thinking this is some kind of game to cheer at. You do not belong here, if you think heroics is a game." Izuku did not take that insult sitting down. "Excuse me?" he roared, shooting up from his seat and startling everyone in his vicinity. "Who the F do you think you are, calling me out in front of everyone? I was merely giving Present Mike something that he wanted. Not once did I cause AF disruption like what you just did. You didn't even raise your goddamned hand and wait to be called on. If anything, you do not belong here, you motherfucking egotistical snob." Izuku's crest feathers rose with his rage, tongues of fire whipping from the tips and his wings. Those sitting near to him tried to distance themselves away, lest he actually exploded and ignited a conflagration. The bespectacled boy was stunned into silence, having not expected to incur such fiery wrath from someone who didn't come up to his chin. Now, no need for shouting, little listeners. Present Mike immediately tried to apply damage control. "We're not here to get at each other's throats. Candidate 167, please sit down and try not to set anything on fire. As for candidate 435 over there, I was actually about to get to the 4th robot." The bespectacled teen, properly chastised, bowed deeply and sat back down. Izuku huffed in vindication before sitting down too. "The 4th robot is what we call the 0-pointer. Present Mike continued as if nothing had happened. "Basically, there is no reason for you to take down this robot. It won't add to your score, and is basically your cue to make a run for safety. And that's it. We've come to the end of the briefing. Please make your way to your respective changing rooms and be at the bus bays by 2 p.m. Good luck out there, and break a leg." Izuku joined the rest of the candidates getting up and heading for the doors. Luckily, that bespectacled snob didn't accost him once, despite apparently being in the same grouping as he was. Dressed in a modified, plain black tracksuit to accommodate his wings, the bus ride down to ground beta was unremarkable. He scanned his opponents. There were easily 50 of them, of which he estimated only 3, at most 4, will make it into the heroics course. There was no room for playing around. He was doing this. There was a great rumble, as the massive gates opened to reveal the fake city that stood behind them. Start. While everyone else stood around looking quite dumb with confusion, Izuku unfurled his wings and took off into the fake city. "What are you all doing? There's no countdown in real life. Be like that flaming chicken and go before all the points are gone." While the other candidates scrambled, Izuku was already taking down his first targets. 4 3-pointer robots rolled down the tarmac, rocket launchers aimed at him. None were able to fire their ammunition before they were engulfed by a wall of flames that instantly cremated them to ashes. 12 points. Izuku took to the air again. A flock of 1-pointers, 7 in total, flew out from behind an alleyway with their lasers locking on him. Izuku raised his hands, created a massive fireball, and hurled it at the robots. The flaming orb smashed through the entire flock, reducing them to charred metal which fell down upon the city as shrapnel. 19 points. By then, he could hear the sounds of his competitors scoping out their own targets. As he took down 3 two-pointers 25 points, Izuku spotted 3 three-pointer robots aiming at a candidate with reptilian scales on his arms, too busy attempting to destroy a two-pointer to notice the danger he was in. Swooping down, Izuku unleashed a wave of fire which incinerated the three-pointers to a crisp 34 points. However, he never expected the backlash. What the hell? You stole those points, you fucker. Izuku blinked. Well, F you too then. He flipped the teen off and flew away in search for more targets and perhaps more grateful candidates to rescue. Within the next 5 minutes, he would rake in another 36 points and save 7 other candidates from immediate danger. He had just settled down a female candidate with a belt that shot out a massive laser when he noticed something odd. Just seconds prior, robots swarmed the fake city waiting for candidates to take them down. Now though, they were gone, as if swept away with a wave of a magic wand. Instinctually, Izuku knew that something was about to happen. The other shoe was about to drop. And it did with terrifying fashion. The first instance that everything was going to hell was the sound of rubble falling, followed by great mechanical roars. All the candidates Izuku included turned around as a massive robot, with a gigantic zero painted on its main body, rumbled down the road, knocking into buildings and creating downpours of debris that kicked up clouds of dust. Monsieur, we need to go, the girl with the laser tagged his arm. There's no point in facing it. Izuku was inclined to agree when he heard someone scream for help. Help! Someone, please! Help! Ignoring the tugging on his arm, Izuku broke away and rushed towards the advancing robot. Monsieur! Braving a rain of rubble, Izuku found the source of the cries. It was the same girl with the bob whom he'd met at the gates. She was trapped until a pile of concrete and twisted metal, the robot inching closer. Miss! Can you move? No, I can't, she cried. My leg is trapped. Izuku looked up. The robot was less than 15 meters away. I'll be right back. The girl watched, confused and scared, as Izuku rushed towards the zero-pointer. Fire bursting into life from his hands, the humanoid phoenix roared and slammed the flames into the metallic body of the robot. There was a deafening whoosh and a fireball ignited. Now, most people would never be able to stop a gargantuan robot in its path save for those with strength-enhancing quirks or all might, perhaps, but the extreme heat from Izuku's fire melted the robot's mechanisms and electrical circuitry in a split second. It barely got to shudder to a stop when the fire spread rapidly. Within 3 seconds, the entire metallic structure was engulfed. Those who watched the spectacle drew back from the rapidly intensifying heat. Metal cracked and crumpled as the entire structure caved in on itself. A deafening groan echoed, with the entire robot falling to pieces as it was completely cremated. Izuku extinguished the fire, and immediately, the smell of burnt metal wafted through the air. It wasn't the most pleasant odor, but at least the girl wasn't in danger of getting turned into a pancake now. And time's up. Present Mick's voice rang through the city. That's all there's to it, folks. Thank you for taking part in the UE entrance exam. Izuku sighed. Thank if it was over. He immediately jogged back to the trapped girl. He pushed and hauled the rubble off her leg and knelt down beside her. Can you walk? The girl tested her leg, expression twisting into a pained wince. No, I think it's sprained. Don't worry, I'll carry you. I'm pretty sure UE provides medical help to those injured during the exam. Gently, Izuku picked the girl up bridal style. However, what none of them expected was a little string of fire to shoot out of Izuku's hand and swirl around the girl's swollen ankle. When asked later, she would describe the feeling as warm, but nothing uncomfortable. The fire dissipated, and the girl bit back a gasp. My ankle. It doesn't hurt anymore. She turned to Izuku with amazement. Oh my god, I was wondering if you were an actual phoenix or something, and I was right. You have the ability to heal people. Izuku blinked. Huh? Who knew? Wait, you didn't know you could heal people with your quirk? You didn't want to risk it if I didn't actually have such an ability, Izuku admitted. That makes sense actually, the girl conceded, but wait, surely you would have known since young? That doesn't apply to me, Izuku admitted again, walking back towards the other candidates. My quirk only came in 10 months ago. 10 months ago? The girl exclaimed. But you were so good with it. You literally cremated that 0-pointer. I will admit, I got lucky, Izuku replied. I can't really explain it, but I think fate finally dealt me a good hand. The girl wanted to ask him what he meant by finally, when Izuku perked up. Oh look. Recovery girl is here. True enough, the famed medi-heroine was going around, tending to the injuries sustained by the candidates during the exam. Izuku approached her. Recovery girl. It's so good to meet you in person. The elderly woman looked up. Goodness, is she all right? I think so. Izuku shrugged. Apparently my quirk healed her sprained ankle. Recovery girl blinked in surprise. Let me have a look. Izuku set the girl down to let the medi-heroine examine her ankle. I am honestly shocked, Recovery girl said after a moment. Her ankle really is healed. But then again, she gave Izuku a thorough look. You do look like a phoenix, so I can't really stay surprised for too long. Do you want me to help you tend to the other candidates? Do you know how to use your quirk to heal others, Sonny? Recovery girl asked. Izuku scratched his cheek. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. It just happened. The medi-heroine was about to decline Izuku's offer, when the same laser-producing girl whom he'd saved just before the 0-pointer was released sauntered forward, clutching her stomach in obvious discomfort. Excuses, but I would like Monsieur Phoenix to heal me, she said, turning all attention towards her. He saved me from danger, and I trust him with my well-being. Surprise spread among the candidates. This was arguably the first time in known history that someone had declined to be healed by Recovery Girl. Izuku stepped forward. Are you sure? When the girl nodded, he asked, Where does it hurt? My stomach. She winced. It is a side effect from my quirk. All right, Izuku nodded. Lay down on the ground. She did as instructed, Izuku kneeling by her side. May I have your permission? She nodded, allowing Izuku to push her tracksuit top up to reveal her stomach. He placed a clawed hand on the exposed skin, his quirk immediately getting to work. Little wisps of fire sprouted from his hand, and the girl sighed in growing relief. I feel much better. Merci beaucoup, monsieur. You saved me several hours of discomfort. I'm glad I could help. Izuku allowed a small uptick of his beak. That set the ball rolling. More candidates came up, sporting various injuries that they requested for Izuku to heal. The humanoid phoenix very quickly took over Recovery Girl's role, prompting the medi-heroine to huff in amused exasperation. Looks like she wasn't needed here anymore. As she quietly left Ground Beta to check on the other examination grounds, she considered the idea of offering an apprenticeship position for this enigma that was Midoriya Izuku. The world should definitely have more healers, after all. Quite an interesting batch of candidates this year. A certain chimera who is also the principal of Yui chirped brightly to his underlings at the table. Anyone that stands out in particular? Everyone gave the mammal incredulous looks. Only one person was in their minds, and they were absolutely certain that even Nizu knew who it was. He just wanted to F with all them, seriously. Aizawa Shoyuda, also known as Underground Hero Eraserhead, decided to take on the spokesperson role as the silence dragged on longer than it was necessary. Midoriya Izuku, 70 villain points and 40 rescue points. Total 110 points, putting him at the very top of the list. You are going to put him in my class, aren't you? You know me so well, Aizawa-kun. Nizu beamed. Indeed, he is going to be in your class. He can learn a lot from you. Aizawa groaned, while Vlad King grumbled to himself, something about 1A always getting the spotlight and the best. Anyways, Nizu continued, do you all have anyone else in mind? There were a few more answers, but it was evidently clear that Midoriya Izuku dominated most of the mental space. It was arguably the shortest staff meeting pertaining to the entrance exam ever. Once everyone had left, Nizu returned to his desk to ruminate. When he heard of Midoriya Izuku's rather dramatic rebirth, he couldn't be more thankful about external circumstances and timing. If the Hero Commission had heard about young Midoriya cremating an unranked villain to nothing but ashes, no doubt those snakes would have begun crafting nefarious plans to lure the humanoid phoenix in under the guise of heroics training, only to then clamp a leash over his neck, cut off his wings and make him another SLV of a corrupt organization who had long foregone the meaning of keeping the public safe. How ironic, given its full name in return for leeching off heroism like a parasite. Nizu was grateful that one of the HPSC associates caused an international incident by making sexist and xenophobic slurs against a high-ranking Taiwanese female pro-hero. The island nation almost severed all ties with their Japanese counterparts had it not been for the government intervening. Despite happening almost a year ago, things remained testy between Taiwan and Japan, and the HPSC was still weathering the fallout from such an scandalous misstep. It was a good distraction. Keep their attention away from destroying a promising hero's future. Also, one could say that Nizu had developed a soft spot for Izuku, despite not having met the teen in person yet. Humanoid individuals with animal quirks ought to band together against poor treatment and abuse, and having Izuku as a friend and ally would most certainly help. Furthermore, once Izuku displayed his power during the sports festival, Hawks will be almost certainly sending an internship offer to the Phoenix, regardless of his overall performance. Hawks was another point of concern for Nizu. Despite the Commission's best attempts at keeping it a secret, the Chimera knew all too well how the winged hero was bought out by the HSPC as a child, and subsequently forced to go through inhumane training by handlers in order to mold him into the perfect hero. Even after his debut and setting up his own agency, Hawks remained leashed to the Commission, and Nizu was doing everything in his power to sever that leash permanently and expose the HSPC for all the corruption, crimes and misdeeds they have done under the name of heroism. And having Midoriya Izuku, a person who will not hesitate to cremate villains alive if so needed, as an ally would make that goal even more attainable. Nizu took a sip of his tea. He really needed to schedule a personal audience with the Phoenix as soon as possible. Handkerchief? Yep. Water bottle? Yep. Clean pair of underwear? Inko chuckled. I'm just messing with you, Izuku. Now you take care, okay? Make lots of friends and have fun. I'll certainly try my best, Izuku nodded, recovering from the mortification. And you should, Inko stressed. Now, you better get going. You don't want to be late and make a bad first impression. I will. I'll see you later this evening, Mum. With that, Izuku left the apartment and began his commute to Yui. While he could have easily flown there and covered the distance in mere minutes, illegal quirk usage was still a no-no. He deliberately left a little earlier than he would have to avoid the morning rush hour and to give himself time to find his classroom. 1A, and being the top candidate with the highest number of points to boot. The first was expected, since he had been keeping track of how many points he got. The second was completely unexpected, though in hindsight it should have been obvious. Heroics wasn't completely about taking down villains. Helping others and get them out of harm's way was also a major part of the job description. In all of the chaos that afternoon, it must have slipped his mind. But there was no point in dwelling in what has passed. The commute was unremarkable, and he was at the gates a full 45 minutes before the first bell. Pulling out his phone, he opened a downloaded map of the campus. Alright, so 1A is on the 3rd floor. I wish they'd give more information than just that. Putting his phone away, Izuku inwardly patted himself on the back for his foresight. Entering the main buildings and riding the elevator up to the 3rd floor, he began his search for his classroom. It would take 15 minutes of wandering the corridors before he came upon a massive door with 1A painted on it in red. Good on Yui's part that they accommodate for all kinds of quirks, including size-related ones. Taking a steadying breath, Izuku slid the door open and stepped inside. It's you. Izuku barely had the time to turn his head when a familiar bespectacled snob was speed-walking towards him. Immediately, his stomach sank as he braced himself for another unwanted tirade. I humbly apologize for my error during the briefing. Izuku blinked, as the teen dipped himself into a perfect 90 degrees bow. He did not expect that. What? I'm Ida Tenya. From Semi-Private Academy, the teen introduced himself. Your performance during the practical assessment and after made me realize that you knew what you were doing as a hero in training. You were clearly the superior candidate, and your actions that day helped me to understand my own error of judgment. For that, I humbly apologize, and I sincerely beg for your forgiveness. Tenya had gone progressively lower during his speech. Any further, Izuku realized, and his head would be touching the floor. Personally, he thought the entire thing was unnecessary. But seeing as Tenya didn't appear to be returning to a normal stance until he actually said something, he might as well do it before he gave his bespectacled classmate crippling spine problems. I forgive you, he replied neutrally. Next time, do not rush to conclusions and actually think before you act or speak. Thank you. Tenya shot back up. I promise to work harder and abide by your advice. We're going to be classmates for 3 years, and I hope that we can work together to become the best heroes we can be. Izuku blinked again. Tenya was either really polite to a fault or not. He wasn't entirely sure, or really enthusiastic again to a fault or not. He wasn't sure. But as the conversation was seemingly done, he just nodded to the bespectacled student and searched for a seat to claim as his own. Aside from him and Tenya, only 2 other students were currently present. One was a muscular teen with a head that was shaped like a rock. They appeared to be communicating with a rabbit on their desk with sign language. Probably an animal-related quirk, Izuku surmised. The second was an appealing black-haired girl sitting at the other corner of the room. Figuring that he was being spoiled for choice here, Izuku decided on the seat 2 places ahead of the girl, by the window. He had just set his bag down when said girl leaned over. Good morning, she spoke eloquently. I'm Yaoyorozu Momo. Morning, Yaoyorozu-san. Izuku turned around. Midoriya Izuku? I've heard about you before, Momo continued. You cremated that slime villain 10 months ago, didn't you? Yes, that was me, Izuku nodded. Had to do it, since the pro-heroes were just standing around doing nothing. I'm surprised that you weren't arrested for illegal quirk usage. It's a long story, Izuku shrugged. The conversation ended at that point. Izuku fished out a novel that he'd been reading these past few days and continued on from the bookmarked page. Over the next 25 minutes, more students began trickling in. For most of them, Izuku didn't really pay much attention to. He'll get to know them better later on. There was an outlier though. They made themselves known with a loud gasp. Izuku barely looked up from his book when suddenly, he was accosted by what appeared to be a shadow-like being that had avian-like characteristics. It had clawed hands, just like him, which were roaming all over his head and crest feathers. He barely heard the footsteps racing towards his desk. Dark Shadow. Cease this behavior at once. The being, Dark Shadow as it was evidently called, ignored the voice. You are a burb. My host is also a burb. 2 burbs should be friends. Izuku blinked, turning to see just who or what the shadow being was connected to. Now he understood what it was saying. The student whom Dark Shadow appeared to emerge from had the head of a bird raven? Crow? He wasn't entirely sure, but the rest of this body was human. Good morning, it seems that Dark Shadow is attempting at playing matchmaker for us, said Izuku. The other student blinked and looked away bashfully. I'm really sorry about her behavior. Oh, no trouble. Izuku absently reached over to pat Dark Shadow on her head. She evidently liked it, because she cooed happily. It's nice to see someone else with bird anatomy. And Dark Shadow seems like an interesting character. That's because I am, the shadow being chirped with a thumbs up. Izuku chuckled. Anyway, I'm Midoriya Izuku. What's your name? Tokoyami Fumikage, he replied while trying to not to wince at the sheer brightness radiating from the phoenix. I've decided. Dark Shadow drew the attention to herself. Aizu and Fumi will be best friends forever. Dark Shadow, please? I mean, I don't mind being friends. Izuku shrugged. How does that sound to you, Tokoyami-kun? The bird-headed student looked away, muttering something about a blinding light, before turning back to Izuku. Sure, I don't mind too. Yay! Dark Shadow hooped. The burbs are going to have so many chicks together. Dark Shadow. Izuku couldn't help the snort that shot out of his mouth. You're a funny one, Shadow-chan. The sentient quirk gasped. Aizu gave me a nickname. Aizu loves me more than Fumi ever does. Fumikage had given up on trying to stop his quirk, but even he had to admit that the sight of Dark Shadow hugging Izuku, looking far happier than he had ever seen the shadow being show in the years since she popped into his life, was extremely heartening. And also incredibly bright. Unused to such blinding light, Fumikage figured that he should invest in some strong sunglasses if Izuku was going to hang around. He'd probably lose his sight at this current rate. All of you didn't even notice me standing here. In the real world, you all will be dead in an instant. All eyes, including dark shadows, turned to the front of the classroom where the voice drawled from. At the teacher's lectern, where it had been empty not long prior, stood a disheveled-looking man with long, unkempt black hair, prominent stubble, and eye bags so severe that Izuku and Fumikage knew wasn't healthy. "I'm Aizawa Shoyuda, your homeroom teacher for the year," said the man, leaning down to pick something up from behind the lectern. He produced 20 pairs of identical uniforms. "Put these on, and meet me out at Training Ground 1 in 15 minutes. Those who arrive later than that will get detention today." Aizawa took a step off the lectern, only to realize that the entire class was still staring at him. "Did I not make myself clear? Do you all want detention?" That got everyone moving. 13 minutes and 23 seconds, Aizawa drawled when the last student finally showed up. "Far too slow. You're expected to be here in a fraction of the time." The girl with the brown bob raised her hand. "Aizawa-sensei, what about the opening ceremony? Or our sessions with the guidance counselor? You are all heroes in training, you have no time for such platitudes," Aizawa cut in. "We've already wasted enough time as it is. Midoriya Izuku, come forward." All eyes turned to the Phoenix as he did as instructed. Aizawa tossed to him a softball. "What was your previous record for a softball throw, without your quirk?" 15 meters. "Do it again but with your quirk. Use it by any means, so long as you don't step out of the semicircle's line." Izuku got into place and eyed the softball for a moment. He couldn't use flames, it would just reduce it to ashes. But with his wings, Izuku threw the softball up into the air at a vertical line. Just as it began to fall back towards the ground, he shot up, unfurled his wings, spun in a circle at increasing speed to create a vortex of wind. With the ball falling closer towards him, Izuku stopped spinning and used one wing to push the spinning air against the ball. There was a loud crack, a split second of stillness, before the softball shot out into the sky like a missile. Within seconds, it was gone. He landed with a gentle flap of his wings. Behind him, Aizawa glanced down at a tracking device. After about 20 seconds, he showed the screen towards the class. 7,820 kilometers. Meanwhile, in a suburb of Sydney, Australia, a young boy that had been innocently playing with toy cars alongside a friend was suddenly brained by a softball that hurtled out of the sky. His friend immediately screamed, running off to get his parents while the dazed kid lay on the street, looking quite confused as the softball rolled to a stop some distance away, smoking slightly. Back in Mizudafu, Class 1A was losing their sheet. 7,820 kilometers? Where in the world did it go? Depending on the direction of the throw and the wind pattern dash. That's effing insane. A female student with pink skin and a pair of horns then squealed, "Oh my gosh. This is so much fun." Izuku could pinpoint the exact moment the temperature plummeted, even though the sun was out and air was warm. "Fun, you say?" The entire class, save for Izuku, froze. An unsettling smile spread across Aizawa's lips, his eyes losing their default tiredness and taking on a cold, flinty glint. "Is that what you think you're going to do for the next 3 years? Having fun?" The eternally tired man zeroed in on the pink-skinned girl, making her flinch. "Do you really think this is all a game? That you are here to goof around and fun?" Izuku mentally count down the moment when the other shoe dropped. "Perhaps this will make you realize the gravity and the precariousness of your position as hero students." Aizawa's smile became even more manic. "The person to place last in this quirk assessment test will be expelled from the school." A beat of silence, followed by sheer pandemonium. "What the F dash? That is totally uncool," a spike-haired redhead shouted, just as another teen with messy gray hair and large, unusual eyelashes also shouted, "That is FING unmanly. That's unfair. You can't do that." "You will find," Aizawa drawled, effectively cutting off all protest, "that I am within my rights to do so as a teacher of Yui. Nothing in this world is fair, and it is the job of pro-heroes to make it a little fairer. However, if you have no potential as a hero, then you are wasting a space that could have been taken by someone more deserving. My decision is final, and if you wish to continue protesting, you are free to walk out any time. No one uttered a word after that. Good, let's continue then. Uraraka Ochako, you're up next. Izuku's impressive distance was completely upended by Ochako's virtually unbeatable infinity score after she used her quirk to send the softball up into the infinite reaches of outer space. It was a reminder that even the most powerful quirks had a better, and that there was no room for complacency, especially with Aizawa's warning looming overhead. He had to go beyond. This was Yui after all, plus Ultra. In the subsequent stations, Izuku used his quirk to his advantage. His wings helped him ace the long jump and the 50-meter sprint, surpassing even Tenya, who had engines in his legs in the latter. He did use his wings some of the way during the endurance run, though he mainly used the stamina in his legs so as to not get disqualified by Aizawa. He couldn't really use his quirk for the sidesteps, grip strength, pull-ups and seated toe touches, but he forced himself beyond his capabilities. At the end of it all, he and the rest of 1A all gathered before Aizawa, sweaty and nervous. The eternally tired man produced a tablet, which projected a holographic screen that listed the names of all the students based on the scores they had. Izuku nodded to himself. He was in second place, just behind Momo. It was honestly no surprise, given how versatile the girl's creation quirk was. In third place was Todoroki Shuto, whom Izuku recognized as the youngest child of Endeavor, the second-ranked hero in the country behind All Might. The bicolor-haired teen was staring at the results with an unreadable expression, but Izuku would have to be blind to see the tension in his jaw. His focus quickly shifted to the spot where everyone else was looking. The last name on the list, at the very bottom, was one Mineta Minoru. Mineta, pack your bags and don't ever darken the halls of Yui ever again. Aizawa spoke in no uncertain terms. You're expelled. Minoru, a short teen with purple ball for hair, immediately burst into tears. Why you can't do this? I spent my entire life reaching for this dream. You have absolutely no potential, Aizawa cut in without a hint of mercy. Don't think I didn't catch you eyeing the female students' bodies as if they were pieces of meat. The heroics industry is already sexualized to a fault. The last thing I will ever do is send a disgusting pervert out into the real world whose sick fantasies are going to get innocent people killed. Leave, before I have someone forcibly remove you from campus. The dam broke. Minoru wailed like a baby and ran away from the training grounds. Izuku watched him go with silent contempt. Thank heavens Aizawa nipped the problem before it could get any worse. Meanwhile, Momo was stunned. Wait, you were serious, Aizawa-sensei? This wasn't some ruse to get us to give our all? Aizawa-sensei is always serious about this, Yaoyorozu-san, Izuku said. Last year, he expelled the entire class over a PRD of a month because they didn't show an ounce of potential or strove to improve their overall behavior. Dead silence followed his revelation. Midoriya, how in the ever-loving F did you know that? Aizawa demanded to know. Izuku shrugged. I wanted to see what I would be facing should I get into Yui. And social media exists, Aizawa-sensei. There were plenty of people smack-talking you for expelling them last year, and all the previous times that you've kicked others to the curb. If I were you, I'd be extra careful in your patrols to make sure none of them attempt to settle the score by illegal vigilantism or outright villainy. No one knew what to say following that. Duly noted, Midoriya, Aizawa nodded. Now as for the rest of you, take this as both a warning and a lesson. Midoriya was right in that I will expel students who show no potential or are slacking off. Just because you all got in, that doesn't mean that your placement here is rock solid. One wrong misstep, and you can say goodbye to being a Yui student. Am I clear? Everyone nodded. Good, then we're done for today, Aizawa continued. You may go back to class and collect your syllabus. I'll see you all tomorrow. It was clear a dismissal as it possible could. As the students trickled off back to the main campus, Izuku heard Fumikage approach. What a mad banquet of darkness, the bird-headed student remarked. I guess this is truly the hero course, isn't it? It sure is, Izuku agreed, before changing the subject. Hey, do you have any plans right now? I figured we can hang out for a bit. Fumikage tilted his head. Hang out? Yeah, you know, go someplace to chill or do something? I've never indulged in such activities before. You haven't? Fumikage shook his head. Very few people wanted to be associated with the host of a demonic parasite. Izuku paused, turning to his classmate. He gently gripped the shorter boy's shoulders. Tell me who they are. I will cremate them to ashes. No, that's illegal. Worth a shot. Please no, it's fine, Fumikage stressed. I've cut them out of my life, and even if I wanted to, I don't know where they are now, and there are too many of them for me to properly remember. Fine, Izuku seemed to relent. Or maybe I should hack into your old school's past records and see who you were classmates with, then I can track them down and cremate them to ashes? Midoriya, no. Dark Shadow suddenly appeared. Aizu, yes. Dark Shadow. After some discussion, Izuku and Fumikage decided to go to a cafe that the latter had been visiting regularly before his enrollment in Yui. It was a cross between a standard, run-of-the-mill cafe and a dingy pub where the people's society sneered as deviants were perceived to hang out in. The aesthetics and furniture were dark-themed, and even the lights were set to the dimmest intensity. There wasn't much conversation going around. At most, Izuku noted, there were 2 people sharing a table. Virtually everyone else were on their own, doing their own things as they sipped their beverages. Even the baristas and the staff manning the counter didn't seem to interact with each other that much. It was unusual but no less interesting, Izuku thought. The 2 avians approached the cashier. Back again, Fumikage, the usual? Yes, please. And extra whipped cream for Dark Shadow. The cashier nodded. And for your boyfriend? Izuku's eyes widened, the flames making up his body burning brighter. He's not my boyfriend, Fumikage corrected without missing a beat. What would you like, Midoriya? Izuku quickly recovered. What's today's special? Dark chocolate latte with burnt caramel bits topped with whipped cream with Oreo crumbs sprinkled on top. I'll have that, then. The cashier tallied up the tab. That'll be 1,620 yen. Shall we split the bill? Asked Izuku. That's fine with me, Fumikage replied. The pair then bagged a table once the money was paid. The cashier promised that a server will be over with their drinks soon. I honestly don't know what to feel about Aizawa-sensei, Fumikage admitted, expelling someone on the first day of school. It is unusual, and it can be jarring for someone not used to such practices, Izuku conceded, but I'm glad that Mineta was the one expelled, and not someone else. I can't imagine how dreadful it must be for the class to have an unapologetic pervert in their midst. You have a point, Fumikage nodded. A waiter came up to their table and served them their drinks. Immediately, Dark Shadow emerged and swiped a bit of whipped cream from Fumicage's drink. Izuku took a sip of his own drink. It was sweet and bitter, but he did have the occasional sweet tooth, and it was not like he stopped exercising after his acceptance into Yui. Izuku believed he was entitled to a sweet treat every now and then. You know, Midoriya, I envy you. Me? Yes, you, Fumikage said bluntly, you have a pair of wings. You have the ability to fly around, whereas I'm stuck on the ground because all I have to show for is the head of a bird, and a shadow being inside me. Well, it's not like I can fly freely without the police coming after me for illegal quirk usage. And I presume you were born with your quirk. The bird head, yes, Fumikage nodded. Dark Shadow came into the picture when I was 4. I won't deny that you had difficult moments because of people fearing demons and whatnot, Izuku continued, but I honestly think you had the better deal. Having a quirk is better than not having one at all in the eyes of society. What do you mean? Fumikage tilted his head, Dark Shadow mirroring his action. Let me be honest with you. I've only had this quirk for less than a year. Fumicage's eyes widened. Pardon? Izuku took another sip of his drink. For 10 years, my quirk factor was dormant. I was effectively quirkless, and I'm sure you know how horribly the quirkless are treated in Japan. Fumikage nodded, prompting Izuku to continue. I was bullied, physically and verbally. I was suicide-baited by the very person I grew up with and was previously childhood friends. And the only reason my quirk became active was because I threw myself off a building, and death activated my quirk factor when I hit the pavement, reviving me and transforming me into what I am now. Fumikage almost dropped his drink. After everything I've gone through, I have come to believe that when something is given, something else is taken. No one lives a perfect life, otherwise we'd all be in paradise by now. Midoriya, I don't know what to say. Fumikage ran a hand through his feathers. I apologize for bringing up bad memories. You have truly gone through hell and back. I have, Izuku agreed, but I've been rewarded for my pain. That former friend whose suicide baited me? He was made to serve probation in lieu of being sent for a spell in juvenile hall, which would have stripped him of any chance of becoming a hero. And my old middle school was shut down and all the staff arrested because of my mother's efforts and the support a detective in the police force gave to me. Things are much better now, and I want to focus on that. Truly, what a mad banquet of darkness. Fumikage sighed, dark shadow nodding in agreement, before moving across the table to envelope Izuku in a hug. Silence followed for a moment, before a new song began to play in the cafe's overhead speakers. I don't recognize this type of genre, Izuku remarked. It's from the pre-Quirk era, Fumikage replied. It's called A Forest, by the gothic rock band The Cure. Pretty dark, but then again, it suits the ambience of this cafe. Not your favorite? Fumikage asked, with a slight hint of disappointment. Well, I never really had a favorite genre of music to begin with, Izuku admitted, but I can at least appreciate gothic rock when the atmosphere is right for it. The disappointment vanished in an instant. Fumikage smiled slightly. You are a good person, Midoriya. Never change. I don't intend to. Izuku learned during their little hangout at the cafe that Fumikage's registered place of residence was actually Hamamatsu City in Shizuoka Prefecture, but he was living with a relative in Mizudafu so as to save on commute fares. Their stations were along the same line, just that Fumikage got off before Izuku did. Before they went their separate ways for the day, they exchanged numbers. Later that night, before Izuku went to bed, he texted Fumikage, offering to meet up with him at Yui Station so that they could walk to class together. Fumikage's response was quick to show up. I would love to. How does 7:30 sound? Izuku immediately replied. Sounds good to me. See you TMR Tokoyami. Nabla. That might have been the end of it, but apparently Fumikage wasn't done. What was that? Beside your message? Izuku replied, it's a kamaji, kinda like an emoji where you can express your emotion through text messages. Fumikage's response came about 15 seconds later. I can literally feel your brightness from the visual, and it's not just from my phone screen. Izuku chuckled. Well, I'm made of fire after all. Being bright is something I can't control. Half a minute would pass before Fumikage replied. I've decided. I'll be bringing a pair of sunglasses to school from tomorrow onwards. If not, I will literally go blind from your ungodly brightness. Izuku laughed. He really liked Fumikage. Fumikage, as promised, was there at Yui Station when Izuku arrived at 7:30 a.m. And the Phoenix very quickly realized that his new friend, could Fumikage really be considered his friend yet? Hopefully, was indeed wearing a pair of tinted sunglasses despite the fact that he was indoors. Didn't you get stared a lot? Asked Izuku as they headed up to street level. I did, Fumikage confirmed, but it's better than to go blind. You're not going to take it off while I'm around, aren't you? Nope. Homeroom came and went without fanfare. A few of their classmates questioned Fumikage about wearing sunglasses, with Tenya losing his sheet about the bird-headed student defying Yui's dress code. Aizawa took one look at Fumikage, who pointed his thumb towards Izuku. The eternally tired hobo simply nodded in acknowledgement, in the process giving Tenya an aneurysm, and carried on with his planned announcements before slipping into his sleeping bag and napping for 20 minutes. Morning classes were a standard affair. They had English with present mic and modern literature with Cementos. Admittedly, the latter was a bit on the dry side, though Fumikage appeared to have a vested interest in the subject. As he told Izuku later during the lunch break, literature was once of his pastimes, especially dark, gothic stories from the pre-Quirk era. Curious about it, Izuku asked for some recommendations, which Fumikage promised to send over via text later that evening. After lunch ended, the pair returned to a class that was alive with anticipation. They had foundational heroics training next, and given that all of their teachers thus far have been pro-heroes, virtually everyone wondered who was going to teach them next. The hour bell rang, and the students of 1A returned to their seats. Barely 5 seconds later, the door burst open. Coming through the door like a regular person, all hell and pandemonium broke, as All Might, dressed in his Silver Age costume, burst through the doorway. No effing way. Izuku straightened up, expression going blank. It's All Might. Fumikage adjusted his sunglasses. The brightness in the room had gone up significantly, and it was not from Izuku this time round. Is he really our teacher? All Might strode towards the lectern with every ounce of confidence as the symbol of peace. He scanned the entire class, beaming brightly. But when his eyes passed Izuku, his smile became just the tiniest bit forced. It would have gone unnoticed by most people, but Fumikage wasn't like most others. He noticed the shift in the smile, and he became warily curious. Today we're going to begin our first lesson on foundational heroics. All Might began as if nothing had happened, which only deepened Fumicage's suspicion further. I am going to wring out the very best from each and every single one of you, and turn you into the greatest heroes you are destined to be. Everyone has to start somewhere, and today we are going to be holding. The number 1 hero whipped a small card out from somewhere. Battle Trials. He put the card away again to someplace, which was odd since the costume didn't appear to have pockets. Before we head down, you will all be needing these. As if on cue, 4 metal slots opened out of the wall, each holding 5 metallic cases with numbers stamped on the lids. Your costumes have been tailored and ready for appraisal. I'll see you all in ground beta in 20 minutes. Izuku found a quiet corner in the changing room, away from the other boys. Putting his case on the bench, he opened it and took out the contents. He nodded to himself. Everything appeared to be in order. Midoriya. He turned around. Fumikage had come up to his side, case in hand. Are you willing to entertain my question? Depends on what it is. Back in the classroom, I caught All Might's smile becoming forced when his line of sight fell upon you. Do you two have a history? Izuku had been in the midst of taking off his blazer when Fumikage asked his question. He glanced back at the others. They were all gushing about All Might being their teacher and what they expected the battle trials to be all about. No one appeared to have heard Fumicage's question, but he didn't want to take the risk. I'll explain it as we go, Izuku replied, voice low. In the meantime, let's get changed first. Despite his suspicions raising again, Fumikage didn't press it. He set down his own case and opened it. The 2 avians suited up. Fumikage was dressed in a full-body black cloak that went down to his ankles, brushing atop a pair of black combat boots. Izuku's outfit was more revealing. His torso was bare, and his legs were covered by a long, flowing white skirt that covered his feet, with an open slit down the length. An ornate golden belt circled his waist, and a pair of decorative gauntlets took their places on his forearms. While the other boys were still chatting and changing, Izuku and Fumikage quietly left the locker room unnoticed. All Might was the catalyst for my Quirk's activation. Catalyst? In what? Fumikage fell silent, as his brain did the math and connected the pieces. No, he didn't. Yes, he did. Never in the short time he had known the other, had Izuku seen Fumikage look so horrified and outraged at the same time. All Might drove you to suicide? It was at the same time that Dark Shadow emerged, looking absolutely feral. The smiley man made our Izu kill himself. I will tear him apart and consume his soul. He will endure the pain of everlasting darkness for all eternity. Shadow-chan, it's fine. There's no need to murder the symbol of peace. Izuku calmly. He has already been made to pay for his sins. I was not blind to how his smile became forced when I came into his line of vision. He is living with the consequences of his actions. Anger aside and with Dark Shadow more or less appeased, Fumikage asked, what sort of consequences? I'll fill you in later. We're almost at ground beta. The pair had just emerged out of a tunnel into the fake city where Izuku made his imprint on Yui. All Might was already waiting there, and once again his signature smile became forced when Izuku and Fumikage came into view. The next 5 minutes were both silent and incredibly awkward, for only All Might. The 2 avians stood a respectable distance away from the man, completely ignoring him and the turbulent storm of emotions running behind the facade of a smile as they chatted amicably about topics that the man never registered. Seeing Midoriya Izuku as a humanoid phoenix, and not the frail, vulnerable human boy whom he'd foolishly left on that roof brought back memories that All Might desperately wished to move on from, but will never, ever, leave his conscience alone. I presume that you witnessed everything, did you? Tsukachi asked rhetorically. Toshinori shifted uncomfortably. He had, indeed, witnessed the entire proceedings. From the moment the Bakugas were brought in, to Tsukachi's bombshell unveiling of every transgression committed by young Katsuki, and the immense shock of seeing the humanoid phoenix enter the room with a deal. As soon as he realized that this phoenix was the boy whom he'd left on the rooftop, and that he actually killed himself to become what he was now, all air left his remaining lung. He had caused someone to end their life. So dazed from the brutal shock, Tashinori never registered the Bakugas and Midoriya's leaving the interrogation room. He only came around when the accompanying officer snapped him out of his stupor and brought him in to face his longtime friend. Tashinori, I have all the mind to both throttle and strangle you right here and now, if not for the fact that I will lose my job for causing grievous hurt to a civilian. Tsukachi continued icily, what the hell were you thinking? How could you be so effing foolish to leave a child, whose dreams you had callously crushed with no regard for his well-being, on a effing rooftop? The emaciated man truly wanted to defend himself, but he very quickly knew that he could come up with nothing that could even begin to justify his actions. He told you, on no uncertain terms, that he was effectively quirkless. Tsukachi proceeded with tearing him a new one. I know you very well, Tashinori. You are not blind to how effed up this society treats the quirkless. Furthermore, once upon a time you were quirkless yourself. Has the power and fame gone into your FNG head? Have you completely forgotten about the plight of those whose only crime is to pull the short straw in the genetic lottery? How can you call yourself the #1 hero when you have acted nothing more than a FING hypocrite? It was a good question indeed, one that Tashinori knew all too well on how to answer. I failed him. I have to make things right somehow. Well, too FING late for that, Tsukachi spat. Midoriya-kun's quirk has activated, and I can say with well certainty that he is going places with it. Furthermore, he has also told me in no uncertain terms that he does not want anything to do with you anymore. And quite frankly, I agree with Midoriya-kun. In fact, I have suggested to him and his mother to file a restraining order against you so that he does not have to suffer any emotional or mental setbacks from your bumbling presence. It would seem impossible for Tashinori to deflate any further, but he somehow did, understandably. You will not approach him for anything. If Midoriya-kun wants to forgive you, he will do it at his own discretion. Symbol of peace or not, if it weren't for the fact that I have been friends with you for years, I would have had you charged for causing the suicide of a minor. So deep in his grief and guilt, Tashinori didn't protest or try to defend himself. It was the truth after all. I will have Officer Sansa escort you out, Tsukachi said with absolute finality. Do not bother attempting any form of communication with me. I need some time to think on whether I should continue my friendship with you. That was almost a full year ago, and Tsukachi still wasn't talking to him. If he still had a stomach, Tashinori would have drowned further in the sinking feeling that was his overwhelming grief. He had lost an important pillar of support that day, and he had no idea if it would be ever rebuilt. The itch to approach young Midoriya and apologize to Jesus-style too, he was willing gnawed at his instincts, but Tashinori knew that it was pointless. The restraining order was in effect, and he couldn't afford to face legal repercussions as the symbol of peace. Despite his personal problems, Japan still needed him. But as much as his duty as the top hero provided some sort of distraction, the guilt from the entire debacle made even the simple act of getting up from his bed more difficult. In a bid to continue functioning, Tashinori sought after any distraction that could temporarily allow him to focus on the present and not let his mind wander back to his greatest failure thus far. The sight of the rest of 1A emerging out of the tunnel, dressed in their hero costumes, graciously provided such a distraction. The costume makes the hero, as some will say. You all look absolutely dashing. Izuku turned towards his classmates, his eyes analyzing the different costumes that were before him. Immediately his stomach dropped. Virtually all of the boys were covered save for Kirishima Idru, who was topless just like him with baggy pieces or accessories, while a majority of the girls save for Jirakyuka and Aoyama you were dressed in skin-tight bodysuits, or in Ojiro Mishira's case, a skimpier version of Chun-Li's outfit from the pre-Quirk era video game franchise Street Fighter, or in Momo and Hagakure Turu's cases. Izuku immediately turned away. Momo was dressed a leotard that barely covered her BRSS, left her abdomen exposed, and her groin area barely covered by padding. As for Toru, she had an invisibility quirk that made her entire body invisible, and her costume comprised of only a pair of gloves and boots. Tokoyami, I'm going to lodge a complaint to Aizawa-sensei. Why? I'm pretty sure there must be some rule or law preventing female minors from wearing such revealing outfits, or in the case of Hagakure-san, no costume at all. Tokoyami blinked, before having a look himself. He too immediately turned away after a second. I'm coming with you as backup. Much appreciated, Tokoyami. Meanwhile, All Might was welcoming the class to ground beta when Tenya interrupted. All Might sensei, I can't help but notice that we're in the same grounds where some of us took part in the practical assessment of the entrance exam. Are we by any chance performing city-based maneuvers like in the exam? Not exactly, young Ida Dash. How are we going to be grouped? Well, I was Dash. Will you expel the worst performing team like what Aizawa-sensei did to Mineta? Buchako asked worriedly. No, Idash. Does my cape look très chic? You asked in general to the class, though she was ignored. Wait. All Might boomed, silencing the class, not all at once. I do not have enhanced hearing like young Jairu here. The number 1 hero took advantage of the silence to fish out a manual that looked comically small in his massive hands and read off his lesson plans. Izuku frowned. A teacher had to refer to notes in order to answer questions? All Might is a PSS poor educator, Tokoyami muttered, verbalizing his friend's thoughts. Today's battle trials will see the class split into 2 groups, heroes and villains. You will be pitted against one another in 2 versus 2 fights that will take place in an enclosed building. The villains have a nuclear bomb in their possession, and it is the hero's job to either capture the villains or secure the bomb within the time limit. If the hero team is unable to accomplish either objective, the villain team wins. All Might put away the manual again to somewhere, because no visible pockets and addressed the class. The teams will be drawn randomly by lots. Now, I know that you might have made some friends already, but in the real world, you don't always have the choice of partners or teammates. Izuku blinked. Where did that box come from? Come forth and draw your lots. One by one, the students went up and drew their lots. The pairs were subsequently decided. Team A, Tetsu and Uraraka Ochako. Team B, Shuji Mezu and Todoroki Shudo. Team C, Ida Tenya and Kirishima Iger. Team D, Aoyama Yu and Ishido Mina. Team E, Satoriko and Kuda Kuji. Team F, Jirakyuka and Kaminari Denki. Team G, Tokoyami Fumikage and Azui Tiu. Team H, Midoriya Izuku and Hagakure Toru. Team I, Ojiro Mishira and Shiro Hanta. All Might sensei. Momo raised a hand. I do not have anyone to partner with as Mineta was expelled yesterday. Ah, I see. All Might looked stumped for a moment. Are you willing to participate on your own, young Yayorozu? Or I could ask one of your classmates to participate a second time and partner with you. I'm willing to go solo. Momo declared, it is a challenge that I'm more than happy to take. Splendid. All Might boomed. Now then, we can proceed with the determination of the factions. A pity that I wasn't paired with you, Midoriya, Fumikage muttered. Likewise, Izuku nodded, but let's do our best, yeah? Midoriya-kun. Izuku turned around, only to immediately turn away from Toru as she bustled up him. Fumikage quickly did the same. The invisible girl stopped at the unexpected response. What's wrong? Hagakure, are you really not wearing anything other than that pair of gloves and boots? Of course. Otherwise, how can I stay invisible? Izuku did not turn around. My apologies if this seems rude on my part, but I refuse to look in your direction in order to protect your modesty, even though there is technically nothing to see. Toru was silent for a moment, before chuckling, you are such a gentleman, Midoriya-kun. But it's okay, I'm completely used to it. As long as you keep your hands to yourself, everything is a-okay. Then, can I at least have your permission to look in your direction during this exercise? Sure. Only then did Izuku and Fumikage turn around towards the invisible girl. Meanwhile, All Might ruffled his hands in 2 boxes that were labeled H and V respectively. He pulled out 2 balls, one from each box. One was labeled with B, and the other a H. The first round will see Team B as the heroes and Team H as the villains, he declared, getting everyone's attention. As for the rest of you, please head up to the observation room, I will join you there shortly. Teams B and H, please follow me. The 4 selected students trailed behind the towering man towards an inconspicuous concrete building. All Might gave them each a set of capture binds, which were meant to immobilize their opponents should they come into direct conflict. Team H, you may enter the building first. Izuku let Toru enter first, before closing the doors behind him. So what's the plan, Midoriya-kun? Todoroki will not let Shuji help him. Instead he will just use his ice to freeze the entire building, Izuku replied immediately, the cogs in his mind already spinning. Todoroki Shudo was an enigma that was both curious and worrying at the same time. In the short time Izuku had been in the presence of the bicolor-haired teen, he had seen Shudo only use his right side, namely his cryokinesis. Never once did he see Shudo use his left side, which Izuku presumed to be pyrokinesis inherited from Endeavor. Furthermore, there was that horrific burn scar over Shudo's left eye, which Izuku instinctually knew couldn't have been the result of an accident. Izuku already had misgivings about Endeavor previously. What he has observed thus far did nothing to alleviate the unsettled feeling in his stomach. He'll hope that by overrunning us with ice, it will guarantee a swift victory. However, I intend to use my fire as a counterattack. Mind you, my fire can easily cremate someone to ashes instantly, so I will warn you before I use it. Toru nodded. Even though Todoroki is among the strongest in one, he still has his limits. Hopefully, my fire can incapacitate him, leaving Shuji to take over. The both of us can use our skills to take him down should we come into combat. Got it. But Midoriya-kun, I heard that Todoroki-kun has the ability to control fire. What if his fire overpowers yours? Izuku shook his head. Todoroki will never use his fire. But why? Toru asked as they arrived in the room where the bomb was held. Izuku became grim. I don't have any definitive proof, but I believe that Todoroki's fire is trauma-locked. Something must have happened in his past to make him swear to never use his left side. However, as the simulated villains, we are supposed to take advantage of any weakness or flaw from the opposing side. As much as I do not wish to further exacerbate whatever trauma Todoroki has gone through, I am not going to jeopardize our grade for sympathy. There is a time and place for that. Toru couldn't find any fault with that reasoning. As she nodded, All Might's voice crackled from a series of hidden intercom speakers. The heroes have entered the building. The battle trial starts now. Hagakure-san, get ready. I'm about to use my fire. Bursts of flame roared to life over Izuku's hands, just as Toru heard crackling noises echo all around them. The temperature began to plummet, and within seconds, ice burst into the room and headed straight towards them. With a loud roar, Izuku unleashed his fire in a conflagration of burning heat. The ice vaporized instantly. The flames burst out of the room and swarmed the entire building, melting the ice in seconds. Outside, Mezu, who had been made to leave shortly before Shudo froze the entire building, looked back to see flames whipping from every opening in the building. Shudo rushed out of the building moments later, chased by a wall of fire that quickly dissipated once he was outside. In it, the dual-quirked student cursed, the fire was too strong. Mezu created a mouth from one of his 6 arms. Todoroki, are you all right? I'm fine. Shudo's expression darkened. I'm not going to be cowed again. He headed to the doorway and froze the entire building a second time. But just like before, the flames came and melted the ice in seconds. Shudo cursed under his breath, pulling away just before his hand got burnt. Todoroki, I think we need to engage our opponents in direct combat. Flushing them out is not going to work, Mezu remarked. Fine, let's get this over with, Shudo replied, already moving in. As Team B entered the building, Hagakure watched them from the 4th floor. They're coming, she told Izuku. All right, slight change of plans. We have about a minute at most before they find us. Izuku slipped into analytical mode again. They are not going to split up, so most likely we'll be facing them together. Hagakure-san, take your capture binds and wait outside the room. preferably behind a nearby corner. Once they enter the room, be as quiet as possible and sneak up to Shuji. Bind him, and in the momentary distraction, I will take down Todoroki. How does that sound? Sounds good to me. Toru was already taking off her gloves. Izuku tactfully looked away as a gesture of respect. The invisible girl grabbed her capture binds and left the room, just as Izuku heard noise coming from the floor below. Toru found a suitable corner, went around it and waited. About 10 seconds later, Shudo and Mezu came up the stairs and began scoping out the various rooms for the bomb. Toru could hear her heart beating wildly, hoping that Mezu would not be able to hear it too. Finally, Team B entered the room where Izuku and the bomb were located. Toru quietly and quickly headed back, waiting by the doorway for her chance. Congratulations, heroes, Izuku put on an impromptu speech. You found me. Is this the end of the line? It will be in seconds, Shudo replied tonelessly, ice already forming on his right hand. Don't make this any more difficult for us. Toru saw her chance. She rushed into the room and wrapped the bindings around Mezu's legs. I got him. Shudo and Mezu immediately reacted. Wadash. Shuji Mezu from Team B has been captured. All Might's voice announced. Shudo immediately moved to attack, but Izuku was faster and on him in seconds. Izuku deliberately used his fire upon Shudo's right side, which caused the latter to flinch. It was all the distraction Izuku needed to tie his own capture bindings around Shudo, immobilizing him and ending the match definitively. Todoroki Shudo from Team B has been captured. The villains win. Before everything went down, the rest of 1A and All Might gathered in the observation room, with a multitude of screens capturing the various floors, corners and rooms of the building where the exercise between Teams B and H was about to unfold. All Might gave Team B the command to start, and a countdown timer set at 15 minutes began running. At first, the audience watched Shudo rush into the building and immediately froze the entire structure with his ice. However, within seconds, a conflagration of fire burst out from Izuku's hands from the 4th floor and spread throughout the building, vaporizing the ice and making Shudo flee back out. Oh my gosh! Ashido Mina had sparkles in her eyes. Midori made the Ice King run. How have the cameras not cut out from the heat? Someone else asked. Must be enhanced technology, someone replied to that question. Fumikage smirked. Good show, Midoriya. Give them a worthy fight. The feed then broadcasted Shudo's second attempt to freeze the entire building solid, which was again met with fire from Izuku. Seeing that such flush-out tactics were not going to work, Shudo and Mezu were forced to enter the building in order to fight their opponents head-on. The collective attention then shifted to Izuku planning with Toru about Team B's imminent arrival. Quite a well-thought-out plan, Momo remarked. Does he have 2 quirks? Kaminari Denki wondered. Analysis and flaming chicken? 2 that you sorely lack, Kyuka snarked. Yeah wait. Denki rounded on the snickering girl. What was that supposed to mean? Fumikage couldn't help the smirk from that little piece of banter. He could even feel Dark Shadow cackling inside him as he returned his attention back towards the screens. Toru had left the room and was hiding behind a corner with her capture binds. Shudo and Mezu showed up 10 seconds later, and after a brief fight, where both members of Team B were subsequently taken down one after the other, All Might called the match. The villains win. Fumikage immediately applauded, with Dark Shadow emerging to do the same, even though Izuku was not able to see them. Back in the fake building, the adrenaline from the battle was beginning to wind down. With All Might's declaration echoing into nothingness, Izuku turned to Toru. Great work, Hagakure-sen. You go ahead and put your accessories back on. I'll untie the heroes. Okay. As the invisible girl hopped to the side, Izuku went to undo the bindings from Mezu's legs first. The multi-armed teen produced a mouth. You got us good, Midoriya. Great job. Thanks, Shuji-san. I apologize if we didn't give you a chance to show off. Nah, it's cool. Mezu's extended mouth brushed off as the bindings came off and allowed him to stand again. There's honestly not much I could do in this situation. Seeing that furthering the conversation was unneeded, Izuku went over to Shudo to undo his bindings. As he did so, the Phoenix noticed the lack of attention and movement coming from the dual quirk teen. Todoroki-san, are you okay? The dichromatic irises turned towards him, but Shudo didn't reply. It appeared that the teen was deep in thought, completely ignoring his surroundings. Izuku resolved to bring up his suspicions with Aizawa later. Teams B and H, please return to the observation room. Izuku turned to Mezu. Could you help Todoroki-san up? I think he needs some support right now. The multi-armed student nodded. He took Shuto into his gentle grasp and led him out of the building. Izuku and Toru followed close behind. Once they returned to the observation room, Shuto broke off from Mezu and went to a quiet corner in silence. So, All Might turned to the class. Who would you say is the MVP of this battle trial? Fumikage immediately raised his hand. Midoriya is the MVP. I agree with Tokoyami-san, Momo also replied. Midoriya-san displayed excellent tactical planning and foresight in anticipating Todoroki-san's initial attacks. He also did not alienate his teammate and included her in the planning, unlike Todoroki-san who initially insisted on doing all of the work. Excellent deduction, young Yaoyorozu. All Might declared. There you have it, the MVP of the battle trial, Midoriya Izuku. The class applauded, Dark Shadow clapping the loudest and cheering Izuku's name. Now with that out of the way, we can proceed with the next battle trial. All Might continued. Teams A as the heroes and Team C as the villains, please make your way down to your designated building. As Ochako, Idru, Tenya and Tetsu left the observation room, Izuku came up to Fumikage. You did well, congrats. Thanks, Tokoyami. I'm sure you'll do well too. One can hope, but I will do my best, Fumikage affirmed. The performances of the subsequent teams varied. The match between teams A and C dragged on due to Idru and Tetsu's equally matched quirks. Rock and metal clashed, neither giving up even as the battle between Ochako and Tenya ended quickly in the latter's favor. In the end, the match concluded with Team C's victory following Tenya's assistance in taking down Tetsu. Fumikage and Tiu were up next as the heroes, against Team D Mina and Yu as the villains. Mina put up a decent fight against Fumikage using her acid secretion quirk, though the combat between Tsuyu and Yu was mostly one-sided in the former's favor. Tsuyu made use of quick reflexes and agility to get out of the way of Yu's laser, which was ultimately the catalyst to the hero's victory. Due to a slip in carelessness, Yu accidentally fired her laser into the ceiling, causing part of the concrete to cave in on her. Tsuyu was able to secure the weapon, before immediately rushing over to pull her classmate out of the rubble. The frog-like girl was, in the end, awarded the MVP status for that additional act of selflessness. The match between teams E and I was arguably the funniest. Kyuka used her extendable earlobes, which were essentially headphone jacks, to listen out for any noise and movement made by the villain team. While Hanta secured the bomb with his tape, once Team E entered the room and faced them head-on, Denki one-shot Hanta and Mashira with an overpowered blast of his electricity emitter quirk. While it did take down the villain team, it had the side effect of short-circuiting Denki's brain. Kyuka, who stayed behind to not get caught in the crossfire, had a hard time keeping her composure as her teammate wandered the room, eyes blank, drooling slightly, two thumbs up and making weird noises. She barely remembered to secure the bomb before the timer ran out. But perhaps the most anticipated match was between Momo as the sole villain, up against the hero Team E, comprised of Riko and Kuji. Fully aware of her opponent's quirks, Momo spent the 5 minutes before the hero's entry blocking up all the windows in the room where the bomb was held and barricading the door with reinforced steel bars. Riko's quirk requires the consumption of sugar, which increases her strength with more consumed, at the cost of her overall intelligence past a certain threshold. Kuji, on the other hand, can summon all manner of animals with their voice, which was why they communicated with sign language so as to not accidentally summon any nearby creatures. When All Might commenced the match, Riko downed an entire packet of sugar, increasing her strength by what Izuku estimated was about 5 times more. Kuji summoned a flock of birds to attack the blocked-up windows. While the birds assaulted the material, the heroes moved in. Meanwhile, Momo had created an electric taser attached to a long pole from her lipids. She banked on the obstructions she placed on the windows to hold steady in the event that the steel bars become no match for Riko's increased strength. This foresight played true when the door was blown in from a powered punch courtesy of Rico. Momo immediately sprang into action, tasering Rico and doing the same to Kuji before the latter could reach the bomb. It was all over in a matter of seconds, and All Might declared the match in Momo's favor at the end. After a short debrief, All Might dismissed the class and immediately ran off somewhere. While the rest of the boys changed out of their costumes, Izuku and Fumikage nodded to one another. Their day was far from over. Finding the staff room after a search, Izuku knocked hard on the door. "Come in," came a voice that he recognized as belonged to Present Mike. Several staff members were present in the room, the voice hero in particular turning towards the two students as they entered. "How can we help you two listeners today? We would like to speak to Aizawa-sensei about an urgent matter." "Well, he's over there, taking his nap." Present Mike jabbed a thumb at what appeared to be an oversized yellow caterpillar resting against a corner of the room. Closer inspection revealed that it was actually a yellow sleeping bag, with a tuft of Aizawa's signature unkempt hair sticking out of the zipper. "I wouldn't risk waking him up, unless you want to deal with a grouchy hobo." "We're willing to risk it. This involves several of our classmates," Fumikage stressed. "What exactly is the problem?" All eyes turned towards the sleeping bag, as Aizawa was now very much awake and emerging from his sleeping bag like an eternally tired butterfly. "Whoever designed the majority of our female classmates' hero costumes took some extremely unsavory liberties in order to fuel their perverted fantasies." Aizawa immediately frowned. "Explain?" The rest of the staff were now listening in, especially Maijima Higuri, otherwise known as Power Loader. However, before Izuku could go into detail, the overhead PA system crackled to life. "Could Aizawa Shoyuda, Midoriya Izuku, Tokoyami Fumikage and Maijima Higuri come to my office please? I believe this conversation should be held in a more private setting." Whose voice was that? Fumikage wondered. That was the principal. Aizawa sighed, already heading for the door. "Come along, we don't have all day, and we certainly can't afford to keep the satanic rat waiting too long." Izuku and Fumikage turned to one another. If they could raise their non-existent eyebrows, they would have. After all, how often was it that a teacher would throw shade at the principal of a prestigious education institution like Yui? A short elevator ride up, and the group of four appeared before a door. Aizawa didn't bother knocking, and opened it to let the teens enter first. "Good afternoon. My mouse, dog or bear? Either way, I'm Principal Nizu." Izuku and Fumikage blinked at the white-furred mammal sitting behind an ornate desk. They turned to one another for a brief moment, before returning their attention to Nizu. "You're neither of those animals, Principal Nizu. I believe you're more of a chimera than anything. Personally, I think you resemble more of a stoat, but I can also see the resemblance to a chimera," Fumikage remarked. Nizu looked impressed, and his beady eyes glinted with intrigue. Aizawa felt the smallest bit of fear settle in his stomach. Intrigue and the sadistic monster that was Nizu never mixed well together. "Interesting deduction, you too," the mammal remarked. "Come, have a seat. Would the both of you like some tea?" "Yes please," both avians spoke at the same time. All three adults blinked at the unexpected synchronicity, even if the teens didn't appear to notice that. Putting that little tidbit of information away, Nizu produced 2 cups, and poured some tea out of a nearby kettle. He offered them to the 2 teens, before diving into the matter at hand. "So what unsavory liberties are you referring to?" 4 of our female classmates, Uraraka, Azui, Ashido and Satu, are dressed in skin-tight bodysuits. I distinctly remember Uraraka-san complaining about how she didn't want a skin-tight bodysuit, nor the heels that was included on her shoes. I don't know about Satu-san, but I didn't hear Azui-san complaining about her costume, which given the nature of her quirk, I can understand why. But while Ashido-san also didn't make any complaints, her cleavage was prominently open with no coverage. It gets worse from there, Fumikage continued. Ojiro Mishira's costume is basically a skimpier version of a female video game character's outfit, which already exposes quite a bit of skin, especially with the legs. Her cleavage was made bare, and only a thin rectangle of fabric covered her groin area. I observed her behavior during the earlier battle trials, and she looked extremely disgruntled by her costume. Aizawa's tired eyes became stormy with outrage. And although Mijima's expression couldn't be seen due to his helmet, it wouldn't be wrong to assume that he mirrored his colleague in his outrage. Nizu had lost his smile, his own expression turning coldly calculative. And there was Yaoyorozu-san and Hagakure-san, whose costumes I believe completely violate any law that was put in place to protect minors. Izuku picked up again. Yaoyorozu-san was dressed in a leotard that has an open window at the front which exposes her abdomen and much of her BRSTS, ending dangerously close to her groin, which I will add is barely covered by 2 layers of padding. As for Hagakure-san, I'm sure you all are aware that she has an invisibility quirk. All 3 adults nodded. Her costume only comprised of a pair of boots and gloves. That's it? That's it? Power Loader exclaimed, that means she's as naked as a newborn baby? Yes, absolutely. She even confirmed that herself to me during the battle trial earlier. The temperature in the office plummeted. Aizawa was literally shaking with erupting rage, Power Loader had gone catatonic with shock, and Nizu's eyes had become absolutely feral from the animalistic genes that still remained in his overall makeup. This is most concerning. Nizu turned to Power Loader, who flinched under the mammal's gaze. I don't suppose it is your third-year students who designed the first year's costumes? Why, you'd be correct, Nizu-san. Usually I don't have a hand in finalizing the first year's costumes, but I realize now that I should have done so much earlier. Well then, given the nature of such transgressions, those responsible will face severe punishment. Nizu nodded. Perhaps we should table the possibility of expulsion, especially for those who designed Ojiro, Yaoyorozu, and Hagakure's costumes. Principal Nizu, if I may give a suggestion? All eyes turned to the humanoid phoenix, Nizu replying immediately, speak your mind, Midoriya-kun. To the surprise of Fumikage, Aizawa, and Power Loader, Izuku got up from the sofa, went over to Nizu's desk, and whispered something into the mammal's ear. That surprise became one of uneasiness when Nizu's expression gradually morphed from interest into sadistic glee. The uneasiness quickly became barely concealed fear as Nizu began laughing hysterically, rattling the windows and teacups on the table. Priceless, Midoriya-kun. Absolutely priceless. I completely, 100%, approve of your suggestion. Rest assured, I will have everything set up and ready tomorrow. Thank you for considering my idea, Principal Nizu. Izuku bowed. I was surprised that you actually agreed to it. The smile Nizu gave made the other 3 people in the room shudder. Aizawa-kun doesn't call me the satanic rat for nothing, you know. So you were listening in on our conversation earlier, Izuku remarked, and I take it that you are far from offended? Absolutely not. Nizu chirps. If anything, I see it as more of a compliment. And you rightfully should, Izuku agreed, unintentionally sending another shiver down Aizawa and Power Loader's spines. If there is one individual I can get behind, it is the Chimera who is more than willing to inflict trauma to teach someone a lesson. Nizu's grin could only be described as positively evil. Oh, you don't even feel the slightest bit of fear of what I am capable of? Women are queens, Izuku replied bluntly, and anyone who disrespects women deserves to suffer. The more traumatic, the better. Nizu's grin became wider. I like you, Midoriya-kun. You have intrigued me and I wish to get to know you better. Are you free in the afternoons? I would like to have tea with you. That sounds nice. Unfortunately my afternoons are spent hanging out with Tokoyami, Izuku replied, unknowingly making the bird-headed student's chest a little lighter, despite the overall fear from the past few minutes. No trouble. Tokoyami-kun can also join our afternoon tea sessions if he wants to. Having more people to discuss the infliction of trauma is always so refreshing. Alarm bells were ringing in Aizawa's head. His instincts told him to grab his 2 students, tell them to flee the country and then resign on the spot. But he knew it was futile. Nizu had sunk his paws into Izuku and Fumikage, the latter looking all the more accepting of such a proposal. At the back of his mind, the eternally tired hobo believed that there might be something budding between the 2 avians, but that was beside the point. The point was that he lost 2 promising heroes to the dark side known as Nizu, and he could only pray that his sanity would remain intact by the time this whole debacle was over. As it turned out, the answer was not so simple, especially given what was about to happen the very next day. At exactly 10 p.m. that evening, a text message was sent to every female student in 1A, sans Riko, Su, Kyuka and Yu. It was a cookie-cutter message, sent by Izuku, with the following words. Principal Nizu would like to speak with you. Please come to the Yui gates at 7:30 a.m. tomorrow. Naturally, there was confusion among the 5 recipients. When asked on the purpose of such a meeting, all Izuku replied was this one line. You'll see. That did nothing to abate the curiosity and concern among the 5 girls. Sleep did not come easy for them, their minds conjuring up all kinds of worst-case scenarios, ranging from a severe scolding, suspension, or even expulsion. They searched their memories for any wrongdoings that they may have committed unknowingly, but found none. While the fear remained, confusion dominated their emotional states. The night was a long one for all 5 girls. Everything's ready, Principal Nizu. Splendid, Tokoingen. The Chimera ignored the noises of struggle behind them. Midoriya-kun, it's all on you now. Got it? The Phoenix nodded, turning to their victims. All right, you pieces of rotten scum, time to face your fate. It appeared that fate orchestrated their meeting. At precisely 7:23 a.m., Momo, Ochako, Mishira, Toru and Mina encountered one another at the ticket concourse level of Yui Station. You all got the same text message too? What a coincidence. Do any of you know why Principal Nizu wanted to meet us? No clue, actually. Do you think we're going to be expelled? I don't think so. Momo took control of the conversation. I don't believe any of us did anything wrong. Personally, I find this whole situation perplexing, but until we actually show up at the gates, we won't know why the principal wants to meet us. For the record, it is almost 7:30. If we don't hurry, we're all going to be late. It was true. A digital clock on the wall read 07. The 5 girls quickly rode the escalator up to street level and speed-walked the short distance towards the gates. However, all 5 stopped in their tracks when they noticed a large crowd of students gathering by the gate. What's going on? Ochako wondered. Some kind of fan meeting? Mina guessed. Momo led the group towards the crowd. They noticed that many of the students were pointing upwards. They looked up, and immediately, everything froze. Dangled by their ankles over the side of one of the glass-windowed buildings from the rooftop ledge were 5 Yui students, all male. They were screaming and wailing, spouting apologies and pleas for mercy. The ropes tying their ankles to the ledge were all that stopped them from plummeting to their deaths. What the F is this? Mishira swore. The other 4 were too speechless to add anything else. Suddenly, Momo's phone chimed with an incoming message. It was from Izuku. I see that you and the others have arrived, Yayarosa-san. Please make your way up to the roof of Building A. The staff will let you all up. She honestly didn't know what to even think of this. But it was increasingly clear to the appealing heiress that Izuku had a hand in this whole drama. She turned to her fellow classmates. Midoriya-san messaged me. He wants up on the roof. Midori? Mina tilted her head. Why? I suspect that he is the reason why 5 students are being dangled by their ankles over the roof, Momo replied. Come on, let's move before someone dies. The 5 girls pushed their way through the crowd and headed for the doors. Mathematics teacher Ectoplasm was there to greet them, and he silently guided them to the elevator and keyed in a code that would take them to the roof. After a short ride up, the doors opened to the concrete roof, where Izuku, Fumikage, and a white mammal whom Momo instinctively guessed was Principal Nizu were already waiting for them. Midoriya-kun. What's going on? Ochako spoke for all 5 of them. Good you're all here. You're just in time to meet out the punishment prescribed to these 5 perverts who sexualized your hero outfits. What punishment? Isn't dangling them over the side of the building by their ankles punishment enough? Momo asked uncertainly. Principal Nizu came forward with a cushion with 5 pairs of scissors on it. Izuku took one and snipped it before the girls. For the crime of sexualizing female minors, you each have the honor of cutting their ropes and sending them plummeting to their fates. 4 of the girls blanched. Why, you can't be serious. This is nothing short of homicide. But I like my costume, Mina protested. There's nothing wrong with it. That may be the case, Ashido, Fumikage replied, But what's stopping that pervert from being emboldened from the lack of complaint and making even more sexualized costumes for future students against their wills? I don't like my costume, sure, Ochako looked conflicted, but I don't think they deserve to die. Nizu shrugged, I find it very fitting, to be honest. Of course, you can choose to sit out of it. Either way, all 5 perverts will be sent falling. Ochako, Mina and Momo looked a little mollified with such a proposal, but still remained mostly uncomfortable that 5 lives were still at stake. Then Mishira surprised them, hand me a pair of scissors. I'll do it. So will I, Toru stepped forward after a moment. Ojiro-san. Hagakure-san? You can't be serious, Mina exclaimed, you'll be charged with murder. I'm willing to take that risk, Mishira declared with no uncertain seriousness. My wishes for my costume were deliberately ignored just to fuel some sick pervert's fantasies. My personal honor was sullied yesterday, and it is only right that I punish the perpetrator for his sins. Mishira-chan makes a lot of sense, Toru agreed. While I was indifferent to being naked, I can't just sit around and let other girls be sexualized. Furthermore, she turned to Izuku and Nizu, even if these perverts deserve to die, they won't actually die if we cut their ropes, right? Both simply shrugged, giving nothing away. Both the tailed and invisible girls took a pair of scissors each. The 5 perverts dangling over the edge had become even louder with their wailing and pleas for mercy. Izuku turned towards the 3 remaining girls. Any more takers? Or do you wish to sit out? Momo, Mina and Ochako turned to one another in silent consideration. After a few moments, all 3 nodded to each other and came forward to Izuku and Nizu. The humanoid phoenix handed Momo the scissors he'd been holding, while the other 2 took the remaining pairs from the cushion. They joined Mishira and Toru, each standing before a hook where the ropes were tied to. Whenever you all are ready, Ochako, Mina and Momo took a steadying breath. Almost in synchronicity with each other, the 5 girls cut the ropes with their scissors. Those watching on the ground would forever remember the exact moment where all 5 boys began to fall. Absolute pandemonium broke out, screams punctuating the air as the victims were sent into free fall, their own screams shooting into a high-pitched falsetto. The ground rapidly approached, ready to meet them and announce their departure from the mortal plane. However, fate, or rather, the machinations of Nizu and Izuku had other plans. Before all 5 perverts could hit the ground, a massive airbag suddenly materialized and expanded, breaking their fall and ensuring their continued existence on Earth. The watching crowd stood silent, completely dumbfounded. No one had any idea that the airbag was even there to begin with. The same sentiment was shared by the 5 girls on the roof. You didn't tell us that there was an airbag waiting for them. Mina screeched. To be fair, we didn't, Izuku conceded, but we can't afford to lose the element of surprise. Otherwise, those 5 perverts will know that they would be safe. They won't learn anything from this punishment if they knew that beforehand. You could have at least started with that. Ochako was indignant. I wouldn't have been so reserved to begin with. I sincerely apologize, Izuku bowed. I am only human, and I will make mistakes. I hope you will forgive me. Tako huffed. Fine, I will. But only because you allowed me to get back at that BSD who sexualized my costume. Izuku nodded in gratitude, when suddenly, an acrid odor filled the air. Oh gross! Toru squealed. What is that god-awful smell? Fumikage looked over the edge. The 5 perverts were still on the airbag, either too dazed to move or had passed out completely. Around each of their groin areas, pools of yellow liquid and soft brown solids were starting to appear. The crowd on the ground were running for the doors, covering their noses with whatever they had on hand in an attempt to block out the horrific odors. Looks like a good amount of cleaning products and new changes of breathes are required, Fumikage remarked. No trouble. I'll handle this, Nizu chirped. Now off to class, you lot. Izuku-kun here will discuss with you all about your hero costumes later. It was a surreal way to start the day, that much could be said with great certainty. As one might expect, the whole debacle about Yui putting on a public spectacle of attempting to murder 5 of their students made waves through social media that day. Videos and photos were uploaded onto all major platforms, and by lunchtime, it was picked up by news networks. Izuku, Fumikage and Nizu would spend an hour in the mammal's office watching several on-air broadcasters reporting on what happened earlier in the day, making commentary about whether Nizu had gone feral or attempting to discern the reason why he nearly executed 5 supposedly innocent students. Supposedly? Do they not know the full story? Well, Japan's media isn't known for its research skills, especially the tabloids. Nizu replied, if there is anything sensational, they'll take it and run with it. I can expect an entire crowd of reporters descending upon Yui tomorrow, Fumikage remarked. A very real possibility, Fumikage-kun, Nizu nodded. Then again, this sort of thing happens every once in a while. How are you going to deal with them? In most instances, we just ignore them, Nizu explained. If they attempt to cross the gates, the school's security system will kick in immediately and bring the shutters down. But I suspect that you have something else on your mind, Izun? Yes, actually, the Phoenix nodded. I want to speak directly to the press when they come. Midoriya, what do you mean? Fumikage asked, dark shadow emerging to mirror his host's confusion. Look at what's currently playing. Izuku pointed at the screen, prompting 3 pairs of eyes to follow his finger. As an anchor talked about the morning's events, the broadcast played an amateur video, obviously taken by one of the students in the crowd, of the 5 dangling perverts. The video panned up to the roof, where wisps of fire could be seen rising up and disappearing into the air. I acknowledge what you said about the media not always doing their research, Principal Nizu, but my gut instinct tells me that some random person is going to actually do their job for once, find out that I had a part in it, and send the vultures after me. I want to be there to set the matter straight, and teach them all a lesson about respecting boundaries and learning to have an ounce of decency towards their fellow citizens. An intrigued look made itself at home in Nizu's expression. Oh, I sense a story here, Izuku-kun. Do you mind sharing? For the record, I do not have a personal history with the press, Izuku emphasized as he straightened up on the sofa, but I have read plenty of stories where the press had endangered the lives of pro-heroes and civilians alike by sticking their heads into places they were not supposed to be in. I wouldn't put it past them to do something stupid tomorrow. If I can get them to back off, it'll save Yui and you, Principal Nizu, one hell of a headache. I appreciate the offer, and I'm willing to let you go ahead with your plan, the mammal nodded. Do whatever you need to do. Thank you, Principal Nizu. Just as Izuku expected, as soon he and Fumikage stepped out of the station, they immediately spotted a large crowd of reporters and camera personnel camped outside the Yui gates. The reporters were shouting questions at the poor students who just wanted to get to their classes, microphones pushed into their personal spaces. Some were even grabbed by the more unscrupulous reporters in their attempt for a story. What a mess, Fumikage muttered. Izuku said nothing, merely taking his friend's hand and moving closer towards the textbook definitions of hooliganism. No sooner were they 5 meters away, one of the reporters spotted them. You were the one spotted on the roof. And here it comes, Izuku thought to himself as a tsunami raced towards him and Fumikage. The Phoenix immediately pushed his friend behind him as microphones were moved into his face. Were you the one who made those 5 students dangle from the roof? One shouted. Did the principal agree to this? We want confirmation. As more reporters fought one another to shove their microphones into his face, Izuku's eye twitched. Screams suddenly echoed as the Phoenix unleashed a wall of fire, forcing the reporters back and destroying more than a few microphones in the process. If you all can act like sensible, decent human beings and not vultures converging on a carcass, I will give you my account, Izuku snarled. A few more microphones were produced, but this time at a safer distance. Yes, I was the one who had those 5 perverts dangled from the roof, Izuku confirmed, but just before an outburst could occur, he manifested a flaming orb in his hand. Did I not tell you to act like human beings? When the energy dissipated, he continued, and yes, Principal Nizu agreed to this. Why did the principal agree to carry out your plan? Someone shouted. What did those 5 poor students do to warrant this inhumane treatment? Those poor students, as I quote you, are perverts who deliberately sexualized my classmates' hero costumes for their own sick, twisted fantasies. One went against her request for a more loose-fitting costume, and 2 others broke the Protection of Minors Act by having the costumes display more skin than what is legally allowed by law. Even so, Shouldn't they be punished according to Yui's rulebook? One reporter questioned. I don't believe that dangling them by the ankles from the roof is a valid punishment. On the contrary, it is, Izuku countered. The Yui guidebook is merely a set of guidelines. The final say lies with the staff and Principal Nizu. If this isn't clear enough to you lot, I did not take the punishment into my own hands. I suggested it to Principal Nizu, who wholeheartedly agreed with it. Perverse behavior cannot be changed easily, not by traditional means of punishment. Principal Nizu agreed that trauma will ensure that those perverts will never even think of sexualizing minors ever again. But isn't suspension or expulsion traumatic enough? Another reporter shouted, why give them the impression that you were planning on killing them? Because rightfully, these kinds of perverts have no place in this world, Izuku shot back. Japan already has an endemic problem of perverse behavior exhibited by men against women, no matter the location, circumstance, or setting. The hero industry is already sexualized to a fault. What kind of school will Yui be if we don't attempt to nip the problem in the bud before it becomes permanently ingrained in the mind? The trauma from almost dying will serve as a lifelong lesson to these 5 perverts, as would the year's suspension meted out alongside it. This will also serve as a warning to others who share such perverse thinking and behavior. A similar fate will await them should they try anything. Absolute silence followed. I've said my piece. I would now appreciate it if you all cleared off and stopped harassing the students. I don't think you all had a permit to even be here in the first place, so scram before I call the police on you. We're the press, some stupid fool cut in, we have every right to be here. Izuku snarled, are you FNG deaf? I said scram. A blast of fire was shot. The reporters and camera personnel screamed, falling back so as to not get burned. In the distraction, Izuku grabbed Fumicage's hand and dragged him through the gate, just before the barriers came down behind them, keeping the press outside. What a mad banquet of darkness, Fumicage muttered. You really went all out on them, didn't you? Yet I fear this will not get them to leave, Izuku growled. He glanced at the time. Maybe I should swing by Principal Nizu's office and suggest that he call the police on them for unlawful disturbance and harassment of minors. I'll cover for you, Fumicage replied. Thanks Tokoyami, you're the best. Izuku returned to class just before the homeroom bell rang, with about a minute to spare. Just as soon as he sat down, the door opened, and Aizawa sauntered into the room. To most of the students, the eternally tired hobo looked just as physically and mentally dead as he was before. But as soon as those bloodshot eyes fell upon Izuku and Fumicage, they became even more lifeless, as if their owner had given up on everything and was waiting for the angels to come take his soul up to heaven. Unfortunately, it wasn't his time to leave the mortal plane, and he still had a class to teach. Damn it. He really should have downed that entire pot of coffee instead of going for just 3 mugs. 25 seconds, an improvement, but you can still do better, Aizawa drawled. Now for today's homeroom, we'll need to cover something important. Important? Izuku would have raised an eyebrow if he had a pair in the first place. Is it about the reporters? You'll be choosing your class representative. The entire class had been holding their breaths in anticipation for whatever major thing that was supposed to come. No one, not even Izuku, had expected something so completely normal. This was immediately followed by a deafening cacophony of clashing voices. Pick me. No, me. I'm the best shot for class rep. Izuku had no idea how long the class went up in verbal arms against one another, until Tenya decided that enough was enough. Everyone, stop this nonsense right now. All eyes turned towards the bespectacled robot. The roles of the class representative are a sacred duty. Tenya began to chop metaphorical vegetables with his hands. They are supposed to lead the class and look out for their fellow peers. This is not something that should be taken lightly. His hands stopped chopping. We should uphold the values of democracy and choose our representatives through a vote. Silence followed for a moment. But won't everyone just vote for themselves? Ciro Hanta interjected. How do we know who is the most trustworthy? Tsu pointed out, we've only known each other for 2 days, Karo. The final decision lies with the candidate with the most votes. Tenya declared, before turning to the hobo, Aizawa is sensei. Do you approve of such a motion? Do whatever, Just get it done before the end of homeroom, Aizawa drawled, already getting into his sleeping bag. Don't disturb me unless the results are in, someone is dying, or if Midoriya and Tokoyami have decided to raise hell upon us all. Momo created slips of paper and distributed them around the class. Staring down at his own slip, Izuku considered who would be the best choice for the representative roles. Ida is definitely one of them, but who else? He scanned the rest of the class, before falling his gaze upon Momo. I'm not sure if Yaoyorozu-san has ever held a leadership position before, but she seems like a capable individual. Alright then, I've decided. Izuku wrote down Momo's name for class representative. Over the next 10 minutes, the rest of the class made their decisions and submitted their votes. The names were tallied up and presented on the blackboard. Yaoyorozu Momo, 4 votes. Midoriya Izuku, 3 votes. Ida Tenya, 2 votes. Somewhere along the line, Aizawa had woken up. Upon the finalization of the results, he turned to the class. Yaoyorozu and Midoriya, come up front. Both did and faced their classmates. It has been decided. Yaoyorozu Momo is class representative, and Midoriya Izuku will be her deputy. Izuku glanced over to Tenya. The bespectacled robot was hunched over, fists clenched. It was evidently clear that he was affected by his loss. And it had been a close-run thing too. Ida was really disappointed. Izuku said, I feel sorry for him. He must have really wanted the position. Lunch hour came, and our 2 avians were conversing over their meals. We can't get everything we want in life, Fumikage shrugged, pausing to toss Dark Shadow a blackberry. For the record, I voted for you. Thank you, Tokoyami. Izuku nodded, swallowing his bite. I hope that you don't mind that I voted for Yaoyorozu-san. No offense was taken, Fumikage replied. I too believe that Yaoyorozu is a capable individual, but I felt that you were a better candidate. Furthermore, I had no intention of being voted as representative. Izuku hummed, taking a sip of his milk tea. Good afternoon, can we sit here? Speak of the devil. Oh, Yaoyorozu-san and Jiru-san, yeah sure. The 2 girls took the seats next to the avians. Congrats on becoming the class representative, Yaoyorozu-san. Thank you, Midoriya-san, Momo beamed. To be honest, this is my first time in a position of authority. And while I am nervous, I'll be sure to do my best. And I will do my best to support you all the way. Fumikage glanced at Kyuka. The earphone-jacked girl was staring at Momo, food untouched. Jiru, are you okay? You're spacing out. Kyuka snapped back into reality. Was I? Sorry, it's just that I thought I saw a halo around Yaoyorozu's head. Fumikage glanced at Momo. I don't see anything, but I understand where you're coming from. Because Midoriya is made entirely of fire, he has a constant glow around his silhouette. Jiru nodded, but before she could say anything else, a deafening alarm blared across the cafeteria. Attention students, this is a level 3 emergency. An automated voice accompanied the alarm. An intruder has infiltrated the grounds. All students, please evacuate to the nearest assembly points quickly and calmly. The students did move quickly. However, calmly they did not. Pandemonium broke out in an instant. Students stampeded towards the doors, creating a bottleneck with multitudes of bodies pushing, shoving and squeezing past one another in an attempt to escape the perceived threat. Amidst the screams and shouts, Izuku was already on his feet. He rushed towards the window where their table was adjacent to, and looked down. He could see the front gates, which mysteriously was open. Members of the press, some of whom he recognized from earlier in the morning, were streaming in like creatures escaping a forest fire. He turned back to his classmates. You 3, stay close together. I'm going to try to calm the crowd. Unfurling his wings, Izuku flew towards the doors of the cafeteria. His talons clutching the exit sign above the doors, the phoenix took a deep breath and let out a deafening roar so loud that the windows and anything that wasn't nailed down rattled. Immediately, all movement and noise ceased. Everyone, do not panic. It is just the press, not a villain attack. Do not panic and evacuate calmly. I repeat, this is not a villain attack. Nobody moved, and it was just as well when the overhead PA system crackled to life a second time. Intruder has been neutralized, level 3 emergency lifted. All students, Please return to your previous activities. Thank you. Izuku lifted off the exit sign and flew back to his classmates. Are you guys okay? We're fine, Momo replied for all three of them. You were amazing, Midoriya-san. I never knew that you could shout so loud. The perks of being a humanoid phoenix, Izuku replied. The students were now dispersing, either returning back to their tables or off to see Recovery Girl for any injuries sustained during the stampede. Please pardon me, but I have to go speak to Principal Nizu. What's wrong? It's the FING press, Izuku growled. I don't know how it happened, but they managed to get in, and quite possibly triggered the alarm. I'm going to inform Nizu about this and see if we can press charges against those reporters for trespassing. With a parting nod, Izuku headed for the doors. As he left, Kyuka asked, is he really going to do it? Absolutely, Jiru, Fumikage replied. I pray for those reporters' journalistic licenses once this is over. Nizu was concerned. Not just because the press had overstepped their boundaries and he was in the process of suing the networks into bankruptcy for trespassing and causing emotional and psychological distress among his students, but also because something was definitely amiss. The first question that was on the staff's mind was how on earth did the press manage to get into the grounds in the first place? Once the press had all been sent packing, Nizu, Cementos, and Snipe went to investigate how the front gates could have malfunctioned. What they found was troubling. Part of the gate had been completely destroyed, not by some kind of explosive, rather something corrosive. The metal structure had been completely broken down, as if it had been disintegrated. Right away, all three knew that this was the work of a Quirk. If some form of powerful acid was used, pieces of metal would have remained. All that was left of the destroyed section was just a dry dust. Nothing in known science could turn a substance, especially a solid, into dust, save for a Quirk. The intruder alarm was not the only one ringing today. Nizu took a sip of his tea in an attempt to further calm his nerves. He would have to be blind and stupid to not realize that this was the work of an individual with less than noble intentions. Once order had been restored, Nizu had ordered an immediate scan of all the security cameras in order to pinpoint the perpetrator. A diagnostic run-through of all digital files stored within the school's computerized cloud was also conducted to ensure that nothing got stolen. The cameras yielded nothing, and nothing appeared out of the ordinary with the digital files. That in of itself was not reassuring to Nizu. It was obvious, at the very least, that whoever disintegrated the front gates and let those vultures storm in was trying to send a message. A declaration of war? A warning of an incoming storm? Whatever it was, Nizu was not going to ignore this obvious threat to the safety of his school and his students. Class 1A was going to have their first rescue training lesson at USJ the next day, the prime time and location for something to go horribly wrong. USJ was part of the UE campus, but it was a good distance away from the main buildings, requiring the students to take a bus to get there. If something terrible was to happen, and if, God forbid, the communication between the main campus and USJ was to get cut off, Nizu won't have any indication or knowledge about it until it was probably too late. The mammal bit his lip. As much as he wanted to have the entire staff stationed at USJ to mitigate the outbreak of any sort of calamity, he knew he couldn't do that. He would deprive the rest of his school the education they needed, and he didn't want any unwanted attention turned towards 1A by pulling off any reckless moves. Nizu sighed. It was might as well that All Might was also supposed to oversee the lesson at USJ alongside 13 and Aizawa. Better to have someone than no one at all. He just prayed, to any deity up in the heavens who would hear him, that the bumbling oaf that was the symbol of peace wouldn't do anything stupid tomorrow. This afternoon, you all will be undergoing rescue training, Aizawa told the students of 1A during homeroom. Being a hero isn't all about punching the living daylights out of villains and looking good for the cameras. Whether it be from natural disasters or man-made acts of villainy, people are going to be injured and trapped. It is an additional responsibility of pro-heroes to get these innocent civilians out of harm's way and away from death's doorstep. Izuku and Fumikage were particularly interested. Unknowingly, both wondered what they were going to do that afternoon. Other than that, Midoriya-kun, Aizawa turned to the humanoid phoenix, who straightened up at the call of his name. Can I trust you to bring the girls down to the support labs during the lunch break to retrieve their hero outfits? You can count on me, Aizawa-sensei. Good, the eternally tired hobo nodded, before slipping back into his sleeping bag. As for the rest of you, do whatever you want for the rest of homeroom, but keep the volume down. I didn't get any sleep last night, and I want to embrace the void of nothingness for a short while. What a mood, Fumikage inwardly remarked, something I can wholeheartedly agree. As Aizawa drifted off, the students split off into their different cliques to do whatever. Momo approached Izuku. Midoriya-san, I can't thank you enough for redesigning our costumes into something more appropriate. It's the least I can do, Izuku replied. Women are queens, and they ought to be respected just as well as anyone else. Dark shadow emerged from Fumikage. In this house, we stand Aizu and drinking respect women juice. When the lunch hour came, Izuku and Fumikage sat down with Momo, Ochako, Mishira, Toru and Mina to have their afternoon meals together. Once everyone had finished, they trooped down to the support labs to pick up the girls' costumes. No one expected the doors to explode off their hinges when they came within walking distance. Hatsum, a voice that Izuku recognized as belonging to Power Loader, screamed in anguished exasperation, for the sake of everything that is holy, can you please stop exploding things? All 5 girls plus Fumikage blinked, completely nonplussed at what had just happened. But Sensei, a crazed-sounding voice that the hero students guessed belonged to this Hatsum, retorted, explosions are a sign of failure. Which means that I must keep improving to get my babies working. Babies? Checking to make sure that a second explosion wasn't going to pulpify them to inorganic material, Izuku peered around the smoking doorframe and called out, good afternoon. My name is Midoriya Izuku from Class 1A. I'm here to collect the modified hero outfits for my classmates. A few moments later, Power Loader came up to him. Once again, his expression was obscured by his helmet, but Izuku didn't need much to guess conclusively that the man was just so done. Oh, Midoriya-kun, thank you for coming. If you could wait for just a moment, I'll be back with your classmates' costumes. A loud noise came from somewhere in the labs, and Power Loader flinched, as if almost bracing himself for another explosion. Thankfully, nothing of the sort happened, and the man went back in to collect the outfits. He returned a minute later, holding a bundle in his hands. Here you go, Midoriya-kun. Thank you so much, Majima-sensei. Izuku nodded as he took the bundle. We can't express our gratitude enough for expediting the process. No trouble, now off you go. You don't want to be late for your first rescue training lesson, do you? The 5 girls and Fumikage also thanked Power Loader for his troubles, before taking their leave alongside Izuku. They only got a few paces before another loud explosion shook the labs and the hallway. Hatsum! Power Loader screeched. What did I just beg you to do? All he got was another round of crazed laughter. The hero students took it as their cue to quicken their footsteps. Looking ready to kick butt, Yaoyorozu-san? Class 1A had gathered in a car park just away from the main buildings, waiting for the hired bus that was to take them to their rescue training lesson. Everyone was dressed in their hero outfits, and when the 5 girls whom Izuku led to the support labs earlier emerged, he knew that his job had been successful. No more did Momo look like STRPR at a nightclub. While her abdomen was exposed in order to allow her to use her quirk, she had a proper top with zippers along her sleeves that she could unzip at will if she needed to expose more skin to create extra objects. Her biceps were covered, and she had a pair of breathes with zippers down the length. A utility belt was wrapped around her waist with multiple pouches where she could store any form of dry snacks in order to keep her lipid levels regulated. Ochako's outfit retained her astronaut theme, but it was noticeably baggier and her boots no longer had those impractical heels. Mina's cleavage was covered up, and Mishira now wore an outfit that resembled a standard-issue karate gi and black felt boots. Toru was still invisible, but it wasn't due to her not wearing anything. Using special nanotechnology, the support labs were able to use the DNA from Toru's hair to weave together a jumpsuit costume that had full coverage and was invisible at the same time. To ensure that she retained some form of presence, Toru wore her gloves and boots from the previous getup. Thank you, Midoriya-san. I really like it. It's practical and stylish at the same time. I'm glad that you love your new costume, Izuku nodded. He glanced down the road. Ah, the bus is here. The bus was part of a self-driving fleet imported from Germany. Good thing too, as it allowed Aizawa to catch another nap. God, does that man need his sleep. Izuku and Momo herded their classmates onto the bus, before boarding last with Aizawa. Momo went to the back, while Izuku beelined for a seat that Fumikage saved for him. The doors closed with a hiss and they were off. The humanoid phoenix settled in for the 20-minute ride. He was content to just sit back and space out when he felt a finger prod his arm. It was Tsuyu. What's the matter, Ajiri-san? Call me Tsuyu, Karo? Izuku blinked. All right, what's up? I usually speak my mind, Karo, the frog-like girl began. I first want to thank you for standing up for my fellow female classmates. No trouble, Tsuyu-san, they deserve respect as any decent human being on this planet. Tsuyu's lips quirked upwards a little. Also, Karo, I want to talk about your quirk. You are a phoenix. Were you born like this or did something happen? Fumikage, who had been listening in on the conversation, had to physically keep Dark Shadow within his body so as to prevent the shadow being from attacking Tsuyu. Something happened, something traumatic, Izuku replied without going into detail. Tsuyu nodded, and much to Fumicage's relief, she didn't press the matter further. You have a very versatile quirk, Izuku-chan. Aijuru, who was sitting not too far away, decided to add his 2 cents. Absolutely. Midobro has a really flashy quirk. He can control fire and he can even fly. An unsettled feeling blossomed in Izuku's stomach. He didn't like where this conversation was going. On the other hand, Aijuru looked at himself, becoming extremely wistful. Even though I can harden any part of my body, there's nothing flashy about it at all. I honestly don't see myself becoming popular with the masses when I go pro. Izuku took offense to that. Kirishima, the spiky redhead, turned to the phoenix, who appeared to grow even deadlier as a dark hue overshadowed his expression. The flashiness of one's quirk will ultimately mean nothing when lives are at stake. Let me give a brutal example. Endeavor has a strong pyrokinesis quirk that is both useful and extremely dangerous. Even though he has the second highest number of villain captures in the industry, he is notorious for having the highest level of property damage and civilian casualties to his name. I don't know if you are aware of how many billions of yen are lost to his rampages. And so what if the villain is caught by him and his flashy quirk? Would you care about that if your home was burnt to the ground in the crossfire? Or your loved one gets grievously injured or killed due to a misfired attack? The only reason why Endeavor hasn't been struck off the industry is because he catches so many villains that the public and the government love him for that, even though a good number of innocent civilians has suffered due to his reckless and thoughtless actions. So I must stress to you, Kirishima, never, ever, talk about the flashiness of quirks as if they are the requirements of a good hero. Many would rather see you as a villain if all that your quirk does is cause pain and suffering under the thin guise of delivering justice. The spiky redhead was rendered completely silent, as was everyone else on the bus. Even Shudo was paying attention, even though Izuku missed the brief glimmer of tentative awe and hope in his dichromatic irises. Midoriya is right, Aizawa suddenly piped up, turning all attention towards him. Quirks mean nothing in the field of heroics. If you're in it for the fame and glory, you're much better off being an actor or some kind of celebrity. One mistake on your part can cost someone their entire life and family. Let this be a lesson for all of you, especially as you embark on rescue training. If you're too busy looking good for the cameras, someone might have already died. And unlike fame and fortune, a lost life cannot be regained. Seeing that he was done, Izuku sat back down. The rest of the bus ride was completely silent, as the students of 1A ruminated over the revelations dropped upon them. The bus pulled up in front of a massive glass dome structure that sparkled in the afternoon sun. Izuku would admit right away that it was impressive, and while Aizawa had given nothing about what was inside, it didn't take much to guess what the building was capable of hosting. Holy shit! This is like Universal Studios Japan. Tetsu exclaimed excitedly. Not quite, Tetsu-kun. Although you are somewhat close. All eyes turned to a person standing by the doorway. They were dressed in an outfit that heavily resembled an astronaut spacesuit. Judging from the way Ochakos perked up, she knew who this person was. Oh my gosh! It's the space hero, 13. That's me. 13 beamed, although it wasn't clear since their helmet visor obscured their expression. Welcome, 1A, to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or as it is more commonly called, USJ. So it is like Universal Studios Japan? Again, not quite, Kirishima-kun, 13 corrected. It's merely a coincidence that the USJ shares the same acronym as the theme park in Osaka. Now, if you will all follow me inside, I will run you through everything that the USJ has to offer. The students followed the space hero through the doorway, with Aizawa flanking the end. Emerging through another set of doors, the class made noises of awe at what stood before them. The USJ has multiple zones that simulate many different kinds of man-made and natural disasters that take place in real life, 13 explained, before pointing towards the aforementioned zones. Those two domes over there are the conflagration and downpour zones, which simulate fires and unusually heavy rainfall. Those two mountainous areas are the landslide and mountain zones. One had the ruins of buildings embedded in the soil, and the other was, as described, a realistic-looking mountain. And finally, we have a ruins zone and a shipwreck zone, which are pretty self-explanatory. In today's lesson, you will be split into the different zones where you will be tasked to rescue civilians against the simulated environments that you will be placed in. This prompted a new round of excited murmuring among the students. At the same time, Izuku noticed Aizawa come up to 13. Their subsequent conversation was hushed, obviously not meant to be heard by his classmates. But Izuku's hearing seemed to pick up the eternally tired hobo ask where All Might was. The space hero held up 3 fingers, and immediately, Izuku knew. He would never forget the moment that All Might spilled to him his secret that could tear apart society should it ever get out. His time limit in his muscle form. But at the same token, questions began to form in Izuku's mind. If All Might was supposed to chaperone, why wasn't he? Why did he go about and use up his time limit when he had a lesson today? As far as he knew, there wasn't some major villain attack in Mizudafu. Shouldn't All Might have left the safety of the citizens to the other pro-heroes so that he could attend today's lesson? People think that All Might is an infallible god, Izuku thought to himself, but really he is only a stupid, arrogant fool who has long passed his usefulness. At that same moment, 13 returned to the students. Sorry for the slightly delay. Now, before we begin with today's rescue training, there is something that you must be aware of. With all 19 pairs of eyes on them, 13 continued, disasters are inevitable. Nature is always trying to figure out ways to eradicate us from this planet. But there are times, many times, I should stress, where mankind does nature's work for her. Humans are flawed, and in times of such flawed behavior, man-made disasters occur. Let me give further clarity. The conflagration zone does not just simulate a fire caused by nature, but also a result of fire Quirk going out of control. Izuku blinked. He could have been overthinking it, but that might have been an uncanny reference to his spiel on the bus earlier, the ruins zone. Not just earthquakes, but also quirks that manipulate the ground we walk on. The shipwreck zone simulates a sinking ship that can be caused by rogue waves, human error, or deliberate sabotage, for example. My main point is humans and quirks can cause just as much suffering as nature can. Even me, 13 gestured to themselves. I'm not sure if all of you know what my quirk is, but essentially, it allows me to create black holes that I use to SCK rubble and debris in, which are subsequently atomized and never seen again. But on the other hand, I could easily use my quirks to make people disappear permanently, and no one would be any the wiser. The entire class was silent, just like it was back on the bus when Izuku finished his spiel. I want to stress to everyone here today that just because you have a powerful quirk, that doesn't automatically make you a hero. You are just as likely to become a villain if you decide to use your quirk for evil. It takes a conscious, continued effort to maintain your drive to do good, but when you are able to do so, people will thank you for it. The silence turned into one of contemplation, and Izuku could see the message sinking in. He suspected that the response would have been positive and affirmative if he hadn't noticed the sudden change in the air that most certainly didn't come from his classmates. The overhead lights began to flicker. Izuku turned just in time to see the area around the central fountain distort and warp. Before he could speak and raise the verbal alarm, a swirling, black mass materialized before the fountain. It rapidly grew bigger, until it encompassed the entire length of the front plaza. "Is this part of the lesson?" asked Iger. As Izuku was quick to realize, no, this was clearly not part of the lesson. Not when literally hundreds of sinister-looking people, led by a young, blue-haired man with what appeared to be disembodied hands attached all over his skinny body and a mist-like humanoid in a suit emerged from the black mass. "Fiend, protect the students!" Aizawa shouted, jumping into his hero persona. "These are villains." It was supposed to be an ordinary lesson on how to rescue trapped civilians in the aftermath of disasters. Instead, the students of 1A, all 19 of them and some barely 16, were faced with hundreds of villains pouring out the black mass that was clearly a portal of some sort. One in particular, a towering, hulking monster that could only be described as something out of the worst nightmares, joined the two leading villains at the front. It had an exposed brain, its skin was a dark purplish blue, and it had a beak with razor-sharp teeth. Izuku noticed the hand-covered man scan his class, almost out of curiosity. In the silence, he heard the villain speak in an unnaturally childish-sounding voice. "Strange, All Might isn't here." The information said that he'd be chaperoning the lesson today. The humanoid phoenix caught an exposed eye between the fingers of the disembodied hand attached to the man's face. It was alit with madness, unhinged aesthetism, and a thirst for the spilling of innocent blood. But maybe he'll come running if we murder some of his pride and joy. 13. Get the students out, Aizawa ordered as he dove right into the fray. As the hobo transformed into the hero known as Eraserhead and began dealing with the villains, 13 pushed the students back towards the door. But before any one of them could take a step, the same black mass that appeared in the central plaza materialized in front of them, blocking off their exit. A pair of yellow eyes appeared amidst the undulating mass. "Good afternoon," came a dark, silky voice that unnerved several of the students. "We are the League of Villains. I apologize for interrupting your lesson today, but we're here with the goal of killing All Might." "Kill All Might?" Denki screeched. The yellow eyes roamed across the class, yet strangely, he isn't here. Was there a change of plans? Izuku wisely kept his beak shut. He may hate the symbol of peace, but now wasn't the time to spill a secret that could topple the country. "No matter," the portal villain continued, "even without All Might, we have a job here today. Have fun fighting our fodder, I'm sure they'll love to get their hands on you." Before anyone could react, the mass expanded and surged towards the class like a rolling mist. Izuku tried to reach for Fumikage, when the ground beneath them seemed to disappear. As Izuku fell into darkness, he heard the screams of his classmates as they suffered a similar fate. It lasted a few seconds, before the darkness gave way to light. Izuku felt himself falling through the air, everything spinning wildly. Instinct took over, and his wings unfurled and flapped, stopping his fall. Izuku righted himself, and taking a moment to reorientate his mind, he took stock of what had happened to him. He was hovering over the shipwreck zone, the main plaza further up ahead where Aizawa was still fighting the villains. Izuku was tempted to fly back and help his teacher, when movement in the water below diverted his attention. Someone had broken through the surface, and was swimming towards the small ferry anchored in the middle of the man-made lake. "Tsuyu-san." He hurtled down towards the deck of the ferry, just as the frog-like girl grabbed onto the railing. Izuku pulled her out of the water onto the deck. "Tsuyu-san, are you all right?" "I'm fine, Karo," she replied, "but we've got company." Looking over the railing, Izuku saw several dozen heads emerge from the water. All of them villains, each with either a water-based or marine mutation quirk, bearing looks of sadistic glee at the two heroes in training. "We have to get out of here, Karo." "1 second, I need answers first." Tsuyu raised an eyebrow, as Izuku went over to the railing. "Oi, Fuckhands McGee brought you all here, right? Who the F is he, and what is that monstrous insult to all avians?" "As if we'll tell you," a shark-headed villain cackled, leaping out of the water to grab a bite out of Izuku, only to be met with fires that cremated the top half of his body in a single second. The other villains blanched as his lower half fell back into the water and sank from view. "I will give you all one more chance to answer my questions," Izuku growled. "If not, I will find out if my fire can work underwater and have you all burnt to ashes." "All right, we'll tell," One of the smarter villains spoke quickly. His name is Shigaraki Tamura, and the mist guy is called Kurojiri. They came with this thing called a Numu that is supposed to kill All Might. What the F is a Numu? Some genetically engineered monster that is supposed to exceed All Might in strength. A monster that can surpass All Might strength-wise? This isn't good, Izuku thought to himself. With the answers in hand, he turned to Tiu. Let's get out of here. She nodded, allowing Izuku to pick her up bridal style. Unfurling his wings, Izuku took off from the deck of the fake ferry and flew towards the edge of the lake. However, it appeared that one of the villains wasn't willing to let their prey escape. Leaping out of the water, he hurled himself towards the two students, webbed hands clawing at them. Izuku immediately unleashed a fireball that instantly cremated the villain. But instead of dissipating, the fireball continued its trajectory towards the water. The flames disappeared when they hit the surface, but the most unusual sight was to come. The water started bubbling and the screams began. Phoenix and Frog blanched as the villains in the man-made lake were boiled alive. Some tried to swim their way to safety, but the extreme heat caused their bodies to shut down before they could make it to the edge. Izuku immediately flew away from the lake, covering Tsuyu's eyes as he touched down away from the shipwreck zone. The screams from the doomed villains were now overshadowed by the fighting taking place in the main plaza in front of them. Aizawa, it seemed, had no trouble taking down the low-level villains and thugs, and was now facing off against Shigaraki. Izuku watched in morbid horror as the hand-covered villain managed to grab Aizawa's elbow with his hand. Immediately, the fabric began to peel away and disintegrate into dust. Izuku barely held in the gasp when Aizawa's skin began to peel away too, before the hero managed to yank his elbow out of Shigaraki's grip. Shigaraki has a disintegration quirk, requires all 5 fingers touching the object for the quirk to activate, Izuku thought to himself. However, any further analysis came to a screeching halt when the villain screamed for the Numu. Then, right before Izuku's eyes, the genetically engineered monster pummeled Aizawa to the ground, the sickening sound of bones fracturing echoing through the air. Aizawa didn't have the chance to groan when the Numu peeled him off the ground and slammed him back down. No, not on my watch. Izuku turned to Tsuyu, as Shigaraki laughed maniacally. Hide yourself or get to safety. I'm going in. Izuku-chan, you can't be serious. That monster is stronger than All Might. It will kill you instantly. At this point, nothing matters. I am not going to let our teacher die at the hands of this villain and his monster. Before Tsuyu could stop him, Izuku unfurled his wings and took off. He shot towards the plaza, and with a loud roar, grabbed the attention of both Shigaraki and the Numu, Aizawa too much in pain to realize what was about to happen. Izuku created a large fireball and hurled it at the monster. The intense heat burnt away the Numu's arm. As it shrieked in agony, it dropped Aizawa's mangled body. Seeing his chance, Izuku landed in front of his teacher, pulled his fire to his hands, and unleashed a conflagration straight towards the monster. Never mind that the Numu was stronger than All Might, or the fact that it had a regenerating ability that was slowly regrowing the arm that was burnt off. The wall of fire that came towards it was its final death knell. The Numu screamed an unholy sound made only by the dead souls condemned to the fiery pits of hell. As its body burned, its regeneration ability tried to keep up, but was ultimately powerless against the otherworldly heat of Izuku's fire. Skin turned to charcoal, blood boiled, muscles and organs liquefied and bones splintered. It took a total of 10 seconds before the Numu was completely cremated to a pile of ashes. All that remained were tiny pieces of bone fragments and teeth that survived the cremation. Izuku let his hands fall to his side as he turned around to a shell-shocked Shigaraki. My Numu. Shigaraki released a strangled cry, hands scratching wildly at his throat. No, this cannot be. It was supposed to be stronger than All Might. I can't be dead. This. The villain's cry reached an unholy crescendo, his throat bleeding from the skin being scratched off. Izuku was almost certain that Shigaraki had completely lost his marbles and was slipping into insanity. A black mass suddenly materialized, and Kurojiri stepped out. Young Emissary Tamura, we need to retreat. Shigaraki stopped scratching and screaming, turning crazed eyes towards the mist villain. I managed to incapacitate 13, but one of the students managed to escape. Reinforcements will be here any seconds, and we can't afford to take them on. Shigaraki's hands began to tremble. No, this cannot be it. This can't end like this. We were supposed to kill All Might, to bring this rotten, corrupt society down. He never showed that Godmed smile, and our Numa gets. He screamed, whirling on Izuku, gets turned to ashes by this effing NPC. You should have died when Kurogyri teleported you away. You were not supposed to be this strong. You cheated. You used a cheat code. You ruined everything. Hey, you ruined my class lesson by invading. I'm only doing what was expected of me, Izuku replied mockingly. Shigaraki growled, you effing NPC. Since All Might won't show his cowardly face, we'll take his pride by killing you instead. The hand-covered villain lunged for Izuku, despite Kurogyri's attempt to stop him. Izuku was unfazed, and simply met the incoming hand with fire. Shigaraki screamed as the flames hit. Realizing that Kurogyri could easily teleport Shigaraki away, Izuku unleashed another conflagration upon the mist villain. The temperature rose rapidly, as did the screams of the two villains being consumed by the flames. If a layperson had been standing in Izuku's position, they would have seen nothing but fire. But Izuku could easily see the flailing forms of Shigaraki and Kurogyri as the flames ate away at their bodies. The hands covering Shigaraki's body was the first to go, followed by his clothes. Shigaraki's screams ascended into a falsetto as his skin began to blister and roll off, his hair disintegrating. His muscles followed, quickly accompanied by his organs liquefying just like with the Numu. The screams came to an end when Shigaraki's vocal cords were burnt away, leaving his skeleton to crumble amidst the heat. As for Kurogyri, his death throes were noticeably different. The mist making up his body rolled off in great plumes, before his screams died down. What hit the ground didn't look like a person made of mist, rather something more human-like. This prompted Izuku to extinguish his flames. As the bone fragments of Shigaraki fell to the ground, the phoenix rushed over to the spot where Kurogyri previously stood. What laid there both confused and disturbed him. It was a corpse, somewhat singed by his flames, but still intact. It appeared male, with sky-blue, wavy hair that was smoldering. The corpse was dressed in a dark blue martial arts gi, black undershirt and an aviator jacket with faux fur lining, all of which were also smoldering from the flames. A pair of cracked goggles framed his head. Izuku had no idea who this corpse belonged to, nor how did it appear when he had cremated Kurogyri. He wasn't sure what to do with it, but his instincts told him not to touch it, in case there was something important about it. The sound of groans behind him gave him the perfect distraction. Aizawa-sensei. Izuku rushed back to his teacher, kneeling down to assess the damage. Aizawa was bleeding liberally, from his head and all over his body. His limbs were bent in unnatural angles, and Izuku could see the muscles of his teacher's disintegrated elbow bleeding and twitching from the exposure to air. Midori? Aizawa-sensei, try not to move. I'm going to heal you. Wa? Wasting no time, Izuku placed his hands on his teacher's chest and forced his healing powers through. Gentle wisps of fire emerged from his hands and spread across his mangled body. Aizawa sighed from the soothing warmth of the flames. As the bleeding was stopped, his bones put back together, whole and in their rightful places, and the skin over his elbow reforming and covering the wound. The entire process took 15 seconds, and by the time Izuku withdrew the flames, it was as if Aizawa had never been attacked in the first place. Midoriya, the hobo muttered as Izuku helped him sit up. What did you do to me? I healed you, sensei, Izuku replied. As a phoenix, I have the power to heal injuries so long as they are not fatal. How are you feeling? Can you walk? In the rush of adrenaline of fighting the villains and getting pummeled into the ground by the Numu, Aizawa had only felt pain tear his body apart and the ever-approaching feeling of imminent death. Now though, despite being a little lethargic, he felt normal. Then, he remembered his student flying into the fray, cremating the Numu and subsequently the two villains that led this entire invasion to begin with. Midoriya, The sound of the front doors being blasted in interrupted what Aizawa wanted to say. Have no fear. For I am here. Both Hobo and Phoenix turned around. All Might stood at the doorway in his muscle form, looking extremely confused at what was going on. Immediately, Izuku saw red. All Might, he growled, turning the attention towards him as he stood up, wings unfurling in a successful attempt at intimidation. You good-for-nothing, syphilitic, and crabs infected motherfucker. Not long after All Might's poorly timed and late arrival, the rest of Yui's staff showed up, led by Tenya, whom Izuku would later learn was the one who managed to escape and inform the school of the attack. Apparently, the villains had someone who could jam communication signals between buildings, which explained the staff's late arrival. Nizu was also present and immediately instructed the staff to head into the different zones to get the students out and deal with any remaining villains, while he himself called the police and for ambulances. Present Mike beelined towards Aizawa and Izuku, throwing himself onto the former and blabbing about how terrified he was when he heard about the attack and that his best friend was in danger. Not wanting to intrude on what was obviously an NTMT moment between the two men, Izuku quietly broke away and headed back to the corpse of the teenage male that somehow appeared after he cremated Kurogiri. He was still confused, and he hoped that by searching for clues on the corpse, he might get some answers. However, that got the attention of Present Mike. Little listener? Are you Okadash? The question the voice hero had died on his lips as he laid eyes on the corpse. He took off his signature sunglasses, rubbed his eyes, and put them back on. No, he was not seeing things. He tried pinching himself, thinking that this was some kind of fever dream. No, he didn't wake up in his bed. He was still in the USJ, staring at the body that belonged to one of his closest friends, whom he and Shoyuta believed would never be found after his tragic, untimely demise. Yamada, what are you ? Aizawa turned to where his colleague was staring and gaping like a fish. In a matter of 3 seconds, Izuku saw more emotion flash across his homeroom teacher's face than he had ever seen in the few days he had known the eternally tired hobo. There was confusion, before it shifted into realization. Denial was quick to follow, flanked by a desperate need to be proven wrong. The hobo rushed towards the corpse, with Present Mike following. Izuku tactfully moved away, allowing Aizawa to crouch before the corpse, hands trembling and eyes wide. Ooboro? Present Mike muttered shakily. Is that his name? Izuku wondered. No, this can't be right, the voice hero began to ramble. W all saw you getting crushed by the rubble. Your C-Corpse W went missing. W, what is it doing H here? Aizawa whipped his head towards Izuku, eyes manic with desperation. Midoriya, what the F happened? What did you effing do? Admittedly, it was unsettling to see his normally stoic or bored-looking teacher literally trembling with emotion. I don't know, Aizawa-sensei. When I was cremating Kurogiri, the mist rolled off his body, and Oboro, is it? When I extinguished my fire, he was lying there. This might make me sound crazy, but I think Oboro was inside Kurogiri. Izuku was right in that Aizawa and Present Mike were now staring at him as if he had grown a second head. A full moment of awkward, tense silence followed, before it was broken by someone running up to the scene. Midoriya. Izuku turned around to see Fumikage running up to him. Before he could reach him, Dark Shadow emerged and immediately threw herself onto the Phoenix. Aizu is safe. The Dark Void didn't take him away. Fumi was so terrified that he was going to lose his only friend. Izuku hugged the shadow being back as he turned to his friend. Fumikage said, I was beyond terrified when the warp villains separated us. I could see you reaching out to me, but I was too slow. I'm so relieved, and I thank every deity up there, that you are safe. He looked around the plaza. Where are the villains? Did they get away? Before Izuku could correct his friend, Aizawa cut in, putting on a commendable attempt to keep himself together despite the literal bombshell lying before him. Midoriya, Tokoyami, go outside with your classmates, now. This is an order. Fumikage was, understandably, confused, especially after seeing the body in front of his homeroom teacher. But Izuku quickly led him away towards the steps. Midoriya, what's going on? A lot of things, Tokoyami, Izuku replied. I'll explain it later. All 19 students of 1A had gathered outside the main dome of the USJ. The relief was palpable. Despite being separated and warped into the different zones around the facility, most emerged from the entire incident with only cuts, bruises, or scraps. Denki was an exception, having short-circuited himself in the effort to incapacitate the villains he was facing off alongside Momo and Kyuka. Last that Izuku knew, his electric-quirked classmate had been sent back to the main campus to recover under the watchful eye of Recovery Girl. The students huddled in their respective cliques or groups, with Izuku and Fumikage on their own. Some attempted to talk to one another, others remained silent as they processed the traumatic event they just went through. Many watched the crowd of paramedics wheel injured and dead villains like into waiting ambulances, while others were distracted by police officers questioning them and taking their statements about the invasion. Izuku-kun. The humanoid phoenix turned away from comforting Dark Shadow towards the familiar voice. Detective Tsukachi, dressed in his matching trench coat and fedora, approached him and Fumikage. Tsukachi-san, I didn't know you were here. Whenever there is a major villain attack, I'm expected to be there, Tsukachi replied. Are you and your friend okay? No injuries? We're fine, Izuku spoke for the both of them. You know him? Fumikage asked. He's a family friend, Izuku replied, before turning back to the detective. I suppose you want to take our statements? As part of protocol, as you would know. Tsukachi nodded, taking out a voice recorder and activating it. Who would like to start first? I'll go ahead if you don't mind, Midoriya. Izuku shook his head, prompting Fumikage to speak. I was warped away to the downpour zone with Kuda-san, where we faced off against about 50 villains, I believe. All of them were lowly thugs, simply brawn with no brains. Kuda-san and I were able to deal with them fairly easily, especially since there wasn't much light in the zone and my quirk, Dark Shadow, were able to defeat them with her enhanced power. We were able to escape after that. That was when I saw Midoriya, Aizawa-sensei and Yamada-sensei over at the front plaza. I went over, and I saw this body I didn't recognize. They didn't appear to be one of the villains, but Aizawa-sensei and Yamada-sensei appear to be quite distraught about it. The last part made Tsukachi concerned. Eraserhead was arguably the most emotionally stunted heroes in the industry. To hear him actually being distraught, the detective pushed the matter into the back of his mind. He still had Izuku to question. He'll check on Eraserhead after that. Izuku-kun, tell me your side. Just like with Tokoyami, I was warped away, in my case towards the shipwreck zone with Azuri-san. There were, I think, also about 50 villains in the water waiting for us. I tried getting them to spill on the ringleader and the massive genetically engineered monster. Izuku missed Tsukachi minutely flinching, before one tried to attack me. Out of self-defense, my fire destroyed him. That got the others talking, and once I had the answers, I got myself and Azuri-san out. But another one of the villains tried to attack us as we were escaping, and I threw a fireball at him. It cremated him, but for some strange reason, it didn't dissipate. It continued into the water and it caused the lake to boil. Were the rest of the villains still in the water? Asked Tsukachi neutrally. Yes. I can still hear their screams as they were boiled alive. Dark Shadow immediately hugged Izuku. Tsukachi said, Izuku, listen, it's not your fault. Did you intend to kill those villains in the water? No, I never did. I only intended to protect Azuri-san and myself from the villain that attempted to attack us as we were escaping. I had no idea the heat from my extinguished fire could remain long enough to boil water. It's not your fault, the detective stressed again. You did the right thing to protect yourself and your classmate. It was an unfortunate accident. What happened to those villains in the water? Izuku nodded, as Dark Shadow nuzzled her beak into his head. Is there anything else? I touched down in the front plaza, where I saw Aizawa-sensei fighting the ringleader. He was called Shigaraki Tamura, and he had a 5-point disintegration quirk. He managed to disintegrate Aizawa-sensei's elbow before ordering his monster, I think it was called a Numu, to attack him. I saw that monster pound Aizawa-sensei into the ground, and I knew I had to step in. I managed to get Aizawa-sensei away, and I faced the monster in his place. With my fire, I cremated it to ashes, despite the fact that it had a regeneration ability. Shigaraki, he went insane. You see, the Numu was supposed to be stronger than All Might, and the whole purpose of this invasion was to kill the symbol of peace. When he saw me defeat his monster, Shigaraki lost his marbles, and tried to kill me instead. In self-defense, I set him on fire, as well as Kurogiri, who was the one who warped us to the different zones. I ended up cremating Shigaraki, but Kurogiri, his mist rolled off of him, and Oboro kind of was left in his place? Tsukachi-san, will you call me crazy if I say that someone could emerge from another person's physical form if the latter was destroyed? Honestly, Izuku-kun, most people would. But then again, my quirk registered that as a truth, so I cannot say anything of the sort. Fumikage was silent, completely at a loss for words. Dark Shadow was still hugging Izuku. I then healed Aizawa-sensei with my quirk, and that was when All Might appeared, shortly followed by the rest of the Yui staff. That was it, I guess? Tsukachi nodded, before turning off the voice recorder. Thank you for your testimonies, you too. I won't keep you any longer. Izuku-kun, can I trust for you to keep yourself and Tokoyami-kun safe? Yes, Tsukachi-san. With a final acknowledging nod, Tsukachi went off to speak to Principal Nizu, who had just emerged from the USJ with Snipe and Midnight. Principal Nizu, I just spoke with Midoriya and Tokoyami. How are they, Detective? Asked the Chimera. Physically, they're fine, but I believe that Midoriya is especially shaken by what happened, especially when he mentioned about this Oboro character. I don't blame him, Nizu replied, looking really unnerved. Detective, there are plenty of things that we need to talk about, but this conversation must not be heard openly. I would like to invite you to my office where we can divulge in such sensitive information in a more secure, private setting. I plan to invite Izuku-kun too, since I believe he told you information that you yourself find to be unsettling. Tsukachi huffed good-naturedly. I can't get anything past you, can I? But yes, I will gladly take up your invitation. Please lead the way, Principal. Nizu nodded, and dismissed Snipe and Midnight to handle the students. The Chimera and Tsukachi headed back to Izuku and Fumikage, who were engaged in quiet conversation and didn't hear them approach. Izuku-kun. The Phoenix turned around. Principal Nizu, what's the matter? I would like to invite you to my office alongside Detective Tsukachi, Nizu replied, before giving the teen a reassurance. You're not in trouble. There are several things we need to talk about, much of which carry grave importance. He then turned to Fumikage. I would like to invite you to sit in too, Fumikage-kun. I know that your shadowy companion doesn't wish to be separated from your friend just yet. Thank you for your consideration, Principal Nizu. Dark Shadow is most appreciative. I certainly am. First order of business, would anyone like some tea? It wasn't often that someone would accept Nizu's offer of tea whenever they had a meeting with him. Normally they just didn't want the drink or were too terrified of the mammal to accept. Izuku and Fumikage could say that they were outliers, and they were grateful for the soothing beverage after an afternoon of trauma. As for Tsukachi, it wasn't coffee, but it was just as good a hot drink as any. The tea was poured out and offered to the trio. Before we begin, I must stress to you too, Izuku-kun and Fumikage-kun, that what will be discussed here will not leave this office. You cannot tell anyone, classmate or family, about what we talked about. This is sensitive information that can cause mass panic should word get out. I'm already in the process of keeping things under wraps from the press, save for the bare details. Can I have your promise of silence? I solemnly swear. Cross my heart, and hope to die should I slip up, Fumikage replied, with Dark Shadow emerging to give a salute. Excellent. Now we can start off with Izuku-kun's testimony. Nizu steepled his paws together. During his cremation of Kurogiri, the villain responsible for warping you two and your classmates into the different zones around USJ, Izuku-kun inadvertently freed Shirakumo Oboro from his inhumane confinement. Now, why is Oboro-kun significant? Before his tragic, untimely death, Oboro-kun was a classmate to your teachers, Aizawa and Yamada here in Yui. If they both had eyebrows, Izuku and Fumikage would have raised them in surprise. They were an extremely tight-knit trio, but when Oboro-kun was killed during a rescue attempt gone wrong during their second year, Aizawa and Yamada were both left horribly traumatized. You could say, for lack of a better phrase, that they were never the same without their friend. In fact, Aizawa's habit of expelling students with no potential stems from this tragic event. He'd rather see students out of UE, but alive, rather than not taking things seriously and end up dead later on. Both avians were left to ponder over this new revelation. Izuku-kun, I cannot stress enough the great service you have done for your teachers and more this very afternoon. For years, it was believed that Oboro-kun's family would never have closure because even after the villain who caused his death was dealt with, his body mysteriously vanished from the hospital morgue before it could be returned to his family for a funeral and cremation. By bringing him back, Oboro-kun can be finally laid to rest. I'm thankful that I was able to help, however unintentionally. But Principal Nizu Oboro was inside Kurogiri before I cremated the latter. Surely, that isn't natural, right? You're right, Izuku-kun. That is far from natural, Nizu nodded. This actually ties in from the testimonies of both yours and your classmates about the giant beaked monster that was brought in with the villains at the beginning of the invasion. As you pointed out, that monster is called a Numu, which in of itself is a terrifying concept. I'll let you explain further, Detective Tsukachi. With the baton passed over, the detective cleared his throat. During my tenure as head of the Mizudafu police force, I was involved in many investigations about rumored human experimentation involving quirks. The end products are these monstrous beings called Numu. They were once human, but all traces of their humanity were systematically destroyed after having multiple quirks forced into them at once. How is that possible? Fumikage was rightfully confused. Even with something as unlimited as quirks, the idea of forcing multiple quirks upon someone seemed right out of a science fiction novel. My investigations have yielded several conclusions over the years, but have ultimately boiled down to just one. Tsukachi replied, his tone becoming grim. This is the work of a villain so evil, with a quirk so powerful that even seasoned criminals utter his name either out of reverence or fear. He is called All for One, and his quirk allows him to take and give quirks freely with no side effects or drawbacks. How All for One came to become what we call the bogeyman of the criminal underworld stems back to when quirks started manifesting. Nizu jumped in. I'm pretty sure you two are familiar with quirk history, the anarchy and complete collapse of societies and countries alike when people started developing superpowers. Out of the chaos, factions rose, but none were more powerful and unrivaled than the one led by All for One. With his ability to give and take quirks, he amassed a following that outnumbered that of the most tyrannical dictators of the pre-quirk era. He claimed to want a society where the people could live peacefully, but all he truly wanted was absolute, unchallenged power. Those who dared oppose him met horrible ends, until All Might came along and vanquished him several years ago, bringing an era of peace to Japan, hence his title. For a while, we all believed that All Might truly defeated All for One, and that the greatest villain of all time had been killed. Tsukachi sighed heavily. However, with the events at USJ, it is increasingly clear that All for One is not dead, and that he is biding his time to make his return. The Numu was a clear message, one might say a declaration of war upon the peace that will ultimately collapse should word get out. Izuku and Fumikage were surprised that the windows of Nizu's office hadn't frosted over from such damning conclusions. Bringing the focus back to Oboro-kun, Nizu continued after a moment. Even though we can't say for sure, based on Izuku-kun's testimony, we can theorize that All for One was behind the initial stealing of his corpse 14 years ago, and somehow used him to create the villain that we knew as Kurogiri. And there is the enigma that is Shigaraki Tamura. How are the investigations coming along about this character, detective? So far, nothing as of yet. Tsukachi took a sip of his tea. There is nothing in the quirk records about this Shigaraki person. I'm attempting to have the search cover more bases, but I honestly don't think we'll find anything useful other than that he is clearly linked to All for One. It is a pity, especially since Izuku-kun cremated him before we could get answers, Nizu sighed. Principal Nizu, Fumikage spoke up with a slight glare. Are you suggesting that you'd rather have Midoriya die than to fight back against a villain that was going to kill him? Far from it, Tokoyami-kun, Nizu replied placatingly. I'm merely stating that it is unfortunate that we are unable to link certain puzzle pieces because of Izuku-kun's rightful and understandable act of self-defense. However, I apologize, Izuku-kun, if I had insinuated such a scenario. Izuku nodded, accepting the apology. That being said, I have a strong feeling that we might have mitigated a greater catastrophe if we had let Kurogiri and Shigaraki escape with their lives. Nizu continued, a disintegration quirk is scary enough, but a teleportation quirk, as rare as it is and used for acts of villainy? I believe that we might have dodged a major bullet with the unfolding of today's events. Whether or not that was true remained up in the air, although Izuku could understand where the chimera was coming from. So what's going to happen now? Asked Fumikic. The students will get tomorrow off and the weekend to recover from today's events, Nizu said. This will also allow me and my staff to mitigate the fallout when the press learns about the villain attack. Hopefully, come Monday, we can return to some form of normalcy. Both avians nodded. Such a move was a sensible one. With that out of the way, I believe someone wants to see you, Izuku, Nizu brightened. At that precise moment, a series of knocks came from the door. It automatically opened, allowing Aizawa and Present Mike to step into the office. Aizawa-sensei, Izuku stood up with Fumikic. Given everything that Nizu had said thus far, Izuku was ultimately not surprised when Aizawa and Present Mike dropped into a perfect 90 degrees bow before him. Midoriya, you were incredibly reckless and you could have gotten killed, the eternally tired hobo began. That being said, it was your actions that brought back the stolen corpse of our friend, allowing us to return him to his family where he can finally be laid to rest after 14 years. I do not say this often, but you have mine and Yamada's eternal gratitude for bringing us and Oboro's family closure. Thank you, Midoriya Izuku. Aizawa-sensei, I did what I did to protect you. If I hadn't stepped in, you would have very likely died by the hands of that Numu. I'm glad that I could bring your deceased friend back, but ultimately I moved so that you could live another day. The two men rightened themselves. We appreciate your selflessness, little listener, Present Mike replied, but your safety is just as important. You are still young, so let us protect you, listener. Yes, we are teaching you to prepare you for the world outside, but in such unforeseen events such as this, it is our responsibility to ensure that you go home to your family safe and sound. It is better that we sacrifice our own lives so that we can preserve our hope for the future. This back and forth was very heartwarming, but Nizu saw a need to interrupt before they continued on for God knows how long. He did have another meeting after this. Aizawa-kun, wasn't there something else that you wanted to say? The hobo nodded. Oboro's parents would like to meet you in person, Midoriya. They want to thank you for bringing their son home. Are they here on campus? Yes, Aizawa nodded. I'm supposed to take you to meet them now. Best that we do not keep them waiting then, Izuku remarked, before turning to Nizu and Tsukachi. Thank you for this enlightening meeting. I'll be taking my leave now. As am I, Fumikic added. I need to contact my uncle before he turns Mizudafu upside down trying to locate me. No trouble, you two. Take care, and I hope we can meet again for afternoon tea soon. Nizu waved them off. Once the two avians had departed with their teachers, whatever jovialness the chimera had melted off his expression. He turned on the intercom on his desk. Tasha Noriyagi, please come in. Tsukachi got up from his seat and went to stand next to Nizu's chair. The door opened, and the gaunt, true form of All Might sauntered into the office. Have a seat, we have a lot to discuss. The detective took vindictive pleasure in seeing his former friend shudder from Nizu's icy tone. He remained steadfast in his aloofness when All Might glanced towards him in a silent plea for solidarity. Any chance of forgiveness was still a long way off. Tashinori Yagi, I have absolutely no clue what was going on inside that empty head of yours when you failed to show up for one as rescue training lesson today. Didn't I give you specific instructions that you were supposed to chaperone in case something was to go south? Why am I hearing reports that you used up your time limit stopping petty crimes all over Mizudafu when you were clearly needed for a lesson? The shadow of the symbol of peace wilted under Nizu's merciless questioning, something which Tsukachi was again more than willing to take vindictive pleasure towards. I can't just abandon my duties as the #1 hero. Oh, so other heroes don't exist then? Nizu shot back, which Tsukachi inwardly applauded. How self-centered and arrogant are you, Tashinori Yagi, to believe that you are the only pro-hero out there and that the peace of Mizudafu rests on your shoulders? Come off your high horse. Just because you are the symbol of peace, That doesn't mean that you can discount the work of other heroes who are also doing their job to maintain peace in this very city. Do you honestly believe that the entire industry revolves around you? Tsukachi huffed in exasperation. He thought that his current opinion of Tashinori couldn't fall any further. He was clearly wrong. In your arrogance and hubris, you not only endangered your students by not being there to get them to safety following the villain's invasion, but it also shows your incompetence as a teacher of Yui. Nizu continued to tear the skeletal man apart. I know that I hired you not only as protection but also for you to find your successor, but I am beginning to see the error of my judgment. Tashinori Yagi, effective immediately, you are hereby fired from Yui. Pack your things, and never darken the hallways of my school ever again. Tsukachi expected many things, like All Might falling to his knees and begging Nizu for another chance, among others. It was a slight surprise for the detective to see his former friend merely nod silently before getting up from the sofa and leaving the office without a further word. When the door closed behind the man, Nizu sighed. Tashinori may have given us peace as All Might, but at many costs to himself and the greater future as a whole. I personally fear that such peace may not remain for much longer, knowing that All for One is still alive, Tsukachi remarked. The path ahead is uncertain, detective, even more so than before. Nizu turned his gaze out of the window. I just hope that my students would not get caught up in the crossfires like they did today.